Start off. Well, hey there, everyone. Hello to you guys in the chat and watching. Welcome back to my channel. It's Kristi. I've been doing a recording lately, and we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going. We're going to have this hangout tonight, and then tomorrow is my Patreon hangout. So hangouts galore. But tonight I'm having on two guests. This was arranged basically during last night's hangout when I saw Chrisiousity in the chat and we were talking about the topic of tonight's chat, and Kevin also wanted to join in, so here we all are. And for those of you who don't know, I think each of us might take a piece or contribute to this story. I'll kick it over to my guest to give some of the background. We're going to be talking about JF Gariepy, I think is a correct pronunciation. Andy Warski. We also might talk about a new revelation coming out of the atheist community from a woman, Christina, who many of you might know. She's done videos for a while, even though she hasn't done them regularly in the recent past. But she talked about a very inappropriate interaction with Lawrence Krauss being the one acting inappropriate. But tonight we're going to talk about pretty serious subjects, so content warning. There's going to be a lot of really disturbing and unpleasant conversation to be had. But I think one thing that we've learned from the Me Too moment and the Me Too movement is that these conversations are important to have because they are uncomfortable. And it's by talking about these things and hashing them out and putting light on them that they stop being taboo and the behaviors become, hopefully, taboo instead. Right, so with that said, I want to introduce Chrisiousity and Kevin. Chrisiousity, since I talked to Kevin last night, do you want to say hello to the people? And yeah, we'll start with that and a greeting from Kevin, and then we'll take up with the conversation.
Hello, everybody. People who've been on Kristi's channel before probably know me, but I have my own YouTube on my own channel, Chrisiousity. That's about it.
And what was your most recent video?
Oh, I actually did a different hangout with Malmrose Projects, which was really interesting. And we were talking about, for anybody who doesn't know, she is fabulous. She does a lot of talk about everything from gaming to movies. She's going for her degree in sociology. And she provides just some really excellent input. And we were talking about the MythCon 5 lineup and some of the things we found rather strange about it. Let's put it that way.
And you also have a series that you're doing on MythCon, which seems really appropriate in terms of the kind of community that we're talking about and the problems that were sort of pointed at by MythCon last year.
Yeah, I do think that when you talk about how a culture can be set up, that could be a culture of harassment or a culture that accepts misogyny, accepts racism, or a culture that doesn't, and how you go about saying, well, who am I making comfortable here and who am I not making comfortable here? What are those sort of the social rules that I'm implementing and how does that play out? So I'm not interested in MythCon because I have a fascination for, minor cons that are in Milwaukee, but it's about, how these things play out and how that they create a culture that just basically enables or even rewards harassment of women. And yeah, it's pretty yuck.
Yeah, very much so. Just so you know, sometimes your audio is dropping out, and I don't know what setting you have it on, but you might want to try dropping it down to audio only because everything you say is so interesting and I don't want to miss a word. So I'll kick it over now to Kevin. Kevin, you, if you want to talk a little bit about, what people can watch on your channel, but also you have your series Descent of Manosphere, where you have a topic or an ongoing segment called The Inevitable Bit about Rape. Maybe you want to talk about your channel and also how the themes of rape that you covered might preface some of the stuff we're going to be seeing tonight.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought you were just going to do like a general intro, and I was just going to say, "Oh, you all know me. Just go and subscribe to Chrisiousity." But no, you've asked me a serious question about a thing I actually do. Okay, yeah. I do a series called The Descent of Manosphere, as Kristi said, and I take one particular person who is, vaguely speaking, anti-feminist in some way, and I analyse their work and their themes and all the rest of it. And one thing I came to discover after the first couple of episodes and doing the research was that they all have hideous, appalling things to say about rape and sexual assault, even if it's just quote unquote sort of vaguely being rape apologists or vaguely doing victim blaming or something like that, through to people just actively saying that rape should be made legal, as indeed Rouge V did. So I found that was a recurring theme, and I felt that it was sort of vaguely edgy comedy to do a thing called the inevitable bit about rape. So in each episode, I do a segment where I take on one or possibly several things that they've said hideous about rape. And I haven't yet featured either of any of the three people, or certainly two people, that we're going to be mentioning in this series. But should I ever have to, that bit's basically set up.
Right, it's already done for you. The clips are already pulled.
Yes, very much so.
Shall we take these in chronological order? So we'll start with the JF story first. And I have to say, I might. It's probably better if Chrisiousity or Kevin perhaps discuss the background of this to catch people up who might not have known all of it in terms of what's going on, and we can unpack. I think, Kevin, you said you read the article very recently,
well,
and
yeah, if Chrisiousity wants to give us like a general broad overview of the thing, and then I've actually got, if you want to lock the screen on me for a bit, I've got the actual court documents, which I'd like to read a little bit from, because I think it's absolutely pertinent and shows that the defense that they're putting up is total nonsense.
All right, so this is about Mr. Gariepy, who he was in the United States living with a wife who was pregnant, and they were having problems. They were separating. He was afraid of having to go back to Canada. He also appears to just be generally obsessed with having babies. So he started talking to somebody who had autism, was on the autism spectrum, who basically there were, she's been described by people who've examined her as having a 10 or 11-year-old's mental ability, which I know that can be an odd way of putting it, and that can give, that's not really the best kind of terminology. I'm not into that, but anyway, he had her come up to meet him where he was. He was still married. He moved her directly in, and they started having unprotected sex so that she could become pregnant. So she was 19 years old at the time. Her parents came and got her and brought her back because they were her caretakers. She has not a capacity to really understand things like how to have a baby, how to take care of a baby, she doesn't even really do all of her own daily living care herself. And yeah, it was a really sick kind of situation when you read into it. And I do want people to know, because I know that some people were concerned, when this first came out, I had contacted, and this came out, I don't know, several weeks ago. I had contacted the lawyers that are mentioned in this document, who are the lawyers for the family, to let them know this is being passed around. This man is on YouTube saying all this stuff about these people and claiming that the father is, abusive or tried to hit him. I would have tried to hit the hell out of him myself if I was, the parent. So I can understand that. But just saying, like, you have some really icky people now, these white supremacist fucknuts, you know, were passing around this poor woman and her family's information, and it was sick. So I did make sure that the lawyers were aware that this was happening so that they could be protected. And then, you know, up until very recently, an article was published that sort of brought this all up again. Up until then, I didn't talk about it because I was hoping it would all die down. But now it's pretty obvious that as long as this sick dude, and I mean that he is sick, there are other court appointed psychologists who've looked at him and have found him to be mentally ill and just refusing to sort of take care of his own mental health because he believes himself to be the almighty, all wonderful, sanest person in the world. He's, you know, that type. So, but just so people know that we're, you know, we're trying to do things as ethically as we can and keep people protected who should be protected.
Right.
Yeah.
And thanks for pointing that out, because there was this has been internet drama for 6 weeks, so you said, like at least a month and a half. And so the scuttlebutt and the Twitter stuff and the people getting agitated was happening on YouTube, but the recent article really brought it up again, and also put shone a bigger spotlight on it. So yeah, sorry, Kev, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, Kristi left off on a really interesting point of saying that he considers himself to be this kind of Superman character, which a lot of fascists do, to the point where he actually appeared pro se in the court case. I have to say that he defended himself. He literally felt that he was so mentally capable that he defended himself.
And Milo.
Yeah, there's a thing that the far right consider themselves to be some sort of super race, and they show it in really odd ways that backfire because they don't know the law clearly, and that's fine. I don't know the law, but that's why I would hire a legal expert to defend me if I was in need of such. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to take you through now this court case document. If you want to lock the screen on me now, Kristi, and I'll
will do.
You'll have to tell me because I obviously have to keep it on the actual thing.
Locked and loaded. We're ready to go.
Right, here we are. Right, it's from the court. Here we go. The Court of Appeal. This is all in the legal domain.
Okay, are you scared? Are you sharing your screen?
Am I sharing? Oh, do I have to share the screen?
Well, that's why I thought you want it locked on, because you were going to.
Well, not just that, but I have to go out of audio only to share the bleeding screen. So,
yeah, you do have to go out of audio only. That's all right. I'll cover for you. Oh, look at that! Look at the gorgeous hair. Kevin's going to be looking at the screen, so I'll talk about the lovely locks.
I'm now screen sharing. Can everyone see the document?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Right. This is all in the court domain, the legal domain, because it's court transcripts and there's no duck dropping. You will, when I scroll down in a moment, you will see one bit that's redacted. It's the date of birth of the person in question, because obviously that's legally protected information, and you don't need to see it because, I mean, you're not going to a fucking birthday party, Jesus. Anyway, so this is from the Court of Appeals. This is from the case where the parents were trying to get legal guardian custody over the daughter, who essentially, it seems, Jean-Francois Gariepy essentially stole her, for want of a better phrase. Yes.
Oh, Kevin, we lost your sound. Do you hear that also, Chrisiousity? But yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, he's gone.
we can still see the screen, Kevin, but we can't hear you. Lovely technical problems. Yep, that's doing all the right things. we can watch you check. Otherwise, you might have to F5.
No, okay.
Oh no, you're back. You're back.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Apologies. Yeah, as I said, that's you all saw that's the official court document, so I don't need to go through that again. Right, this is the quote that Kristi briefly alluded to. Here, this is from Dr. Mark Thompson, who states the ward, which is the legal jargon for the person whose guardianship is being sought, so the JF's victim essentially, demonstrates the social. What is that now? Why is that popped up? I don't know if you can see that. I've now got a fucking thing on my screen.
Better you than me, because I had the same problem earlier.
Yeah. The ward demonstrates the social and mental maturity of a 10 or 11-year-old child. She has no comprehension of cause and effect relationships and is often is known to have impaired decision making. So this is the crux of it. The reason that I believe him to be a rapist, and I think a lot of people do, and the reason that he essentially skipped town in order to avoid prosecution, it would seem, was the fact that she can't give consent. She isn't mentally able to do so. And one of the defenses given by JF and his rape apologist friends is that they claim that this document that I'm showing you here, which is from page 45 of the thing, and I'll give Kristi the link so she can post this under the video so you can check it for yourself. They claim this is from the lawyer, and so therefore it can't be trusted. But it's a psychiatric evaluation from, as you can see there, Rosa C. Gonzalez, MD. She is a specialist in adult, child, and adolescent psychiatry. She's not a lawyer. She's a fucking doctor. And this takes you through the whole history of the thing. Interestingly, one thing just for possibly a learning experience, let's say, it says here that she first became aware of JF because he was given a platform by the drunken peasants, as you can see there. Another reason that we shouldn't platform fucking Nazis. Just a little bit of a heads up for everyone there. And then we go down to page 49.
That's pretty scary to think that watching the drunken peasants then led to this. I mean,
yeah,
just the, you know.
Yeah, you can, if you go to the link, you'll be able to see the whole thing. But I just want to take you to from that to this. It says here, right, I'm just going to read it out verbatim. As for the question of capacity, an incapacitated person is an adult individual who because of a physical or mental condition is subsequently unable to provide food, clothing, and shelter for himself or herself, to care for the individual's own physical health, and or to manage an individual's own financial affairs. At this time, I find no proof that Jacqueline S. Castellanos, who's the JF's victim, is able to provide food, clothing, or shelter for herself. She's not employed and therefore has no financial resources of her own. I do not see her being able to gain employment at this time to make enough money to take care of herself, which, by the way, is interesting, that he was essentially keeping her as some sort of brood mare, in essence, which is rather worrying. The quote, so back to the thing, quote, the problems with her autism spectrum disorder make her cognitive and social processing a problem that could get her into a lot of problems without the right guidance. I do not feel she has the ability at this time to take an informed judgment as to marriage, which is quite important. She is currently unable to apply for or receive government benefits of her own. She has been unsuccessful at seeking or retaining employment. She does not have the ability to contract or incur obligations, no ability to sue or defend lawsuits, no ability to manage property or to make any gifts or deposition of property, no ability to determine a safe residence, no ability to consent to medical, dental, psychological, or psychiatric treatment, no ability to handle... Oh, shoot. Yeah, go in now. Oh, I was on a roll then. Where am I? To handle a bank account of her own, no ability to make decisions regarding financial obligations, no ability to enter into insurance contracts of any nature. She has the ability to operate a motor vehicle, but would not know what to do if something would happen except for to be able to call her parents. At this time, I do not find Jacqueline S. Castellanos capable of being able to take care of herself. Unquote. Now, that's absolutely important because, therefore, she wouldn't have been able to consent to sex legally. Neither will she be able to make consent to travel from, as we saw at the top of the thing, if I take you back, this is from the Court of Appeals in Texas, where she is from Beaumont, Texas, I believe. But JF was at the time...
Oh, no. Oh, you're back.
Hello? I'm back? Okay. Yeah, this it's important because in terms of her change of residence from Texas to North Carolina, where JF was based, she would not have been able to legally make that decision. And so it might actually amount to a crime of him taking what is in essence legally respected an incapacitated person across state lines without the consent of their guardian, which is in of itself a crime which could land him in prison if he were ever to go back to the United States, which he won't because he's a coward who escaped back to Canada to avoid prosecution. Yes, and it's actually fascinating. If you go, you can stop on screen share me now if you wish. It's actually fascinating. Actually, yeah, we don't need to see that ugly piece of fucking nonsense.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating if you go through the thing. He keeps referring to her as his fiance, even though that's technically illegal because he was still married to the woman in North Carolina and there were no divorce proceedings underway, so legally he couldn't be. And he seems to think, and this is where him being mentally unwell himself comes into it, he seems to be under the impression that she's pregnant just because they'd had sex. He doesn't actually have any evidence for this, and in fact, in the court documents, she has a urine and blood pregnancy tests. Both come back negative. There was no plan for an abortion, which he seemed to think there was as well. He's just an obsessive who basically wants to create white babies because that then leads into his white nationalist nonsense. He is a rapist and a very, very dangerous man.
Yeah, that's all pretty disturbing. I'm getting some echo. Kevin,
yeah, I'll put my earphones in.
Thanks. Chrisiousity. I have some things to say. I'll wait. I'll mute Kevin. All right. So yeah, I have some things to say on this topic, but before I start, I wanted to know if you wanted to step up in terms of your, life experience, work experience with people who are in vulnerable situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So my spiel might go a little bit long, so I don't know if you want to do yours first. All right.
No.
So people should know that, oh God, for something like 10 years, I was a case manager. I worked with people who had intellectual disabilities. Women who have developmental or intellectual disabilities are at something like 7 to 8 times the rate of being raped or abused as other women who are comparable to them. And it is a really, it's an epidemic problem, to be honest. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but the basic gist is for those people who are willing to be a predator against people who are sexual predators, an intellectually or developmentally disabled woman is a perfect victim for them. They are vulnerable. They are not taken seriously by authorities when they come forward. It is very rare for anyone to try to actually bring their cases to court because, they just don't make a good witness, right? A lot of them have difficulty, and she, in this, the psychiatrist who's examining her sort of mentions the difficulty that this woman has in expressing herself. She says, well, you'll ask a question and then she'll pause for a little while and then she'll give an appropriate response, so you can see how that would come off strangely to people who were watching her, like, well, what happened then? 10, 9, 8, 7. Oh, well, then I went out to North Carolina. It's so there's a belief among DAs, and I'm sure that there is something to it, that this is a waste of their time. They're not going to be able to get a conviction. People aren't going to take these young women seriously. She has an autism spectrum disorder. And there are a lot of people who are coming out and saying, oh, nobody with autism can have a relationship. That's nonsense. Autism is, there's a reason it's called a spectrum disorder, right? Because there's a lot of potential things that could be involved there. And you could have an autism spectrum disorder and have a family and a job and, everything, and be, perfectly like anybody else in society, and it wouldn't even be that noticeable. Or you could be, at the other end of the spectrum where you can barely speak or interact, or, and it's very obvious that there are disabilities there and problems there. So because of the range that we're talking about, it makes no sense to say, oh, you don't want anybody with autism to have a sexual relationship. No, I want people who can consent to having sexual relationships and want to. I want them to be able to do so. And let's be honest about this particular lady's situation. Maybe if he had actually loved her and had actually gone about something in a loving and respectful way, you know, dragging somebody who's 19 across state lines away from their family, and the only caregivers that they've ever known, in order to immediately move them in and start having unprotected sex so they'll get knocked up. That's not loving. And it's certainly not loving for a person who has these disabilities and special unusual needs. You know, the psychiatrist mentioned that she wasn't eating or sleeping because she was so overwhelmed with anxiety about being pregnant. So that's cruel. You know, this is not an act of love. It's an act of cruelty.
Can I just, it's this, the taking the person away from their support base is also an absolutely classic example of an abusive relationship, where you basically become the only person they can rely on, and so you can completely control them.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, well, there's a lot there with him that makes it obvious that he's a very just abusive person. He's making me mad just thinking about him. However, I'm gonna like rein that in for a minute, and talk about when we say that somebody has the mental capacity of a 10 or 11-year-old, we don't mean they are a 10 or 11-year-old. And so this isn't a young adult lady who has young adult feelings, just like any other person. She doesn't have the capacity, the intellectual capacity, to sort of just go, oh yeah, I'm ready, let's go. Like, that's not who this person is.
Rosa Gonzalez, the psychiatrist, even said she didn't feel she was capable of consenting to dental work. Now, I'm sorry, someone who can't consent to dental work certainly can't consent to move halfway across a continent. Well, not halfway, but, you know, 1,000 miles away from all of their family and friends, away from their entire structure, and to then get pregnant. Because if they can't consent to dental work for themselves, how can they possibly do so for their dependent child?
All right. So what you have when you are working with people, like when I was a case manager, I would often work with people who had disabilities that were impediments, but they still had hopes and dreams and wanted to do things. And there is a process. You can work within that process and the goal is to bring them to the greatest degree of independence and capacity that they are capable of, you know. And I know that it maybe sounds hard, like maybe some people can't go, there are limitations that they can't overcome, places that they're maybe not ever going to get to. And that is sad, but that's also true of everybody. You know, I don't know anybody who's 19 years old and says, this is what I want to do with my life, and boom, there it is, right in their lap. You know, it's going to be work, it's going to be effort, there's going to be compromise. And it's just really, you can't expect that it's going to be a person who has real serious disabilities is going to follow the same path as a person who isn't. It would be like expecting a person who is who can't walk to just get up and start tap dancing. It isn't going to happen, not that way, you know. So yeah, sometimes you have to work within the constraints that the world gives you, and that's not just true of people with disabilities, it's true of everybody. I am a klutz. I'm also never going to be a tap dancer, you know. Like, it's never going to happen. So
yeah, my tale was more of a, I guess, a secondhand story.
This is the story I was telling. The condom was too tight. Like,
I set Andy off. Oh no. early. Sorry about that. The point that I wanted to make was my mom worked for, it was called back in like the 70s and 80s, the Association for Retarded Citizens, but then retarded became not a very nice word. And so they just called it the ARC. And now they talk about, they refer to people with cognitive disabilities. There was a family, so a lot of times people would move into assisted living centers, but sometimes they would stay with their families and then enjoy or join in the activities, that might be organized by the group. And I'm not sure exactly what the situation was, but I remember my mom relating to me a story of someone that was a client of the ARC, or the ARC, and her mother was really worried about her and in a very difficult space, because I don't know what the young woman's disability was, if it was Down's or if it was a different form of disability, but she was, quite sexually enthusiastic, shall we say. And so she would try to hook up with boys that she knew. And her mother was terrified of her getting pregnant because the mother was already like into her 60s. She was taking care of her adult daughter with cognitive disabilities. And the last thing she wanted was to have to bring up a baby and take care of her daughter as she was, retiring. And so they were looking at what were the medical options with her being her guardian. Could they put an implant in her, or was that a violation of? So there's, very important discussions to be had about people who have various types of, not physical disabilities, they have different challenges, but people who have capacity to consent issues. I don't think, and Chrisiousity is kind of, I don't want to take away from somebody their sort of basic human right as a sexual being. There has to be care here. There has to be, especially, as you were pointing out, Chrisiousity, these are vulnerable populations who can be taken advantage of by people. And that's where the concern comes in here, especially, is that being taken advantage of putting somebody who doesn't understand cause and effect, as Kevin read out in the court documents, putting them in a situation where he's trying to get her pregnant, and the stress that would cause her. This is, again, really disturbing, very unsettling behavior. And I'm glad this is coming up in terms of it being exposed and his actions being attached to his name, because he did those things. So I think he should be held responsible for the things that he did. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I don't see any possibility that this would be the last time he ever did anything wrong. Let's put it that way, because this appears to be a pattern of behavior. He lost his job at Duke because of an inappropriate relationship he had with an underling.
It won't change because this is part of his political struggle, as he sees it, to create more white people. This is an action he takes because he feels he's in part of some sort of civilizational war. And I can't see that's going to change. And it certainly hasn't changed in the intermittent time between these actions and now. And so it would be incredibly, it would be stretching credulity to the point of breaking to think that he wouldn't engage in these kind of practices again.
Yeah, so people should know about it, and people should know that to a degree, the alt-right is a horrible place for women. There's a reason not a lot of women sign up for it. It's, basically, you could almost give him the excuse that, well, he probably thinks all women are intellectually beneath him, so that it's not possible for a woman to be a fully realized intellectual person.
Well, they definitely do see women as essentially lesser creatures to make sandwiches and babies is essentially the take. And as you mentioned, very few women sign up for it, and even those that do, I would advise people to go and watch a video made by Tara McCarthy. I wouldn't advise you to watch many of her videos, but the one she made basically asking her male followers to essentially back off from the sexism stuff, to which I had to just mark with absolute incredulity. Just what did you think you were signing up for? You're signing up for men in control, you as a secondary citizen, and then you're worried. Then you get annoyed that they're treating you in exactly that way. They're a very, very sexist movement.
Yeah, and you can see this also. I mean, Newsweek just came out with a story on somebody from, I forget it's becoming really hard to keep all these groups straight these sort of little fractions of white nationalist, but someone who had been sleeping with his mother-in-law and abusing his wife and got into a fight with another male member over all of this. So it's, you know, I mean, these sorts of things are coming up a lot. And a big part of it is just not having a basic respect for women, a basic respect for their humanity and their consent. Because if you don't respect somebody as a human, you don't care if they're consenting or not. Like, it's not even a problem that's really going to keep you up nights, because you just don't even think of them as that way.
Yeah, you don't seek their consent because you don't care if they want to or not. It's simple as that. It's your duty to breed, and so you don't get a choice to consent or not consent. It's happening, and that's why it is a very, very, not just misogynistic to the point of being sort of intellectually repulsive, but it's actually incredibly fucking dangerous and something that the authorities need to get control of.
Yeah, I mean, this is when they say, when certain people say that ideas matter. Yeah, they do. And that's why we really object to sort of fascist ideas and super racist, misogynist ideas, because they don't, there's this, I don't know, thought experiment that some people have sometimes, that you could be the most racist, misogynist, horrible person, but keep it to yourself. And that's just a load of shit. Like, that would never happen in the real world. Like, we all live interconnectedly with us. So if these are the thought processes going on in your head when you're interacting with your fellow human beings, you're like, oh, this one's black, so they're just, you know, they're this and they're that, and this one's got a vagina, so that's this and that's that. Like, that is always going to lead somewhere horrible, you know?
Yeah, there's no way to have those set of incredibly strong, distinct feelings and emotions and ideas in your head and not have them affect your outward activities. There's no way you can do that. It's just, no matter how hard you try, it's going to impact the way in which you interact with people. Like, it might not necessarily mean you're going to go out and become a KKK member or rape every woman you see, but in terms of your interactions, there's no way those people aren't going to pick up on the creepy vibes at the very least.
All right, so just so you guys know, Destiny wanted to get into the chat, and so I've been furiously finding a way, because I'm using a new computer, so my Skype isn't installed, so I'm copying links to the chat and sending them through on Skype. I have sent him a link to join us talking about this topic, and hopefully he'll be joining here shortly. And if not, it's because of problems with the link, but he might be jumping in at any time.
Yeah. Well, that would be fascinating to hear, because I know that he's had a lot to say about this in the past, and of course he's been threatened by JF with suing him over this, which would be really interesting to see. And I'm not surprised that JF hasn't sued him, because let's be honest, it's a pretty open and shut case.
Yeah, well, JF, I think what got me blocked from JF was when he threatened to sue Destiny, and I said, really, have you not wasted enough of whatever money you have left, like suing and being in courts and getting nowhere? Like, just
well, he's got all that. He's got all of Andy Warski's essentially Nazi gold now, so he's probably got a few dollars in the bank, which is incredibly worrying. And again, something that, I mean, if I really want to sit down with, like, I don't know, the head of police or something, and just say, look, these people are really fucking dangerous. They're a danger to women, as we can see. They've got very rapey attitudes. They're very dangerous, obviously, to ethnic minorities. We've seen in Britain the incident of the guy who drove into a group of people leaving a mosque in Finsbury Park in London, killing one man and injuring many others. We've had, obviously, the murderer of Heather Heyer as well, Fields, James Fields. We're seeing a rise in the terrorist attacks, and obviously now a rise in sexual assaults from these people. They're very dangerous, and it's time to nip it in the bud. I'm not saying we need to censor them or no free speech for anybody or anything like that, but these people are not doing free speech. These people are hurting people. These people are engaged in criminal acts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to be very clear. That woman who, I can't remember her name, but she got in trouble over Peterson. She's having somebody on and calling it, oh, unpopular opinions. And she's having on Nazis. Not the problem with Nazis' opinions is not that they're unpopular. Like, let's not sugarcoat this bullshit. It's that they're horrendous and will lead to millions of deaths, because that's where they go. Like, this is like having somebody on to plot a murder with you, calling it an unpopular idea, but instead of one murder, they're plotting 100 million murders. You know,
this is my point. If they're actually interested in just doing unpopular opinions, why do they always go with Nazis? They never have on like people, ISIS members. Their views are very unpopular. Their views are being squashed, suppressed by government bodies and all the rest of it. Why do they never have them on? Is it because partly they don't agree with ISIS members, which I would agree with them on, or is it just that they're Nazis trying to get away with doing Nazi propaganda because they're Nazis?
Yeah, The Big Bang Theory is an awesome sitcom that is an unpopular opinion, but this other stuff is not an unpopular opinion.
Exactly, and there's nothing dangerous inherent, other than I suppose the future of comedy, in debating that as an unpopular opinion. Debating, are the Jews really people? That's rather dangerous.
All right, I have a Destiny update, by the way. He's going to be joining us in about 15 to 20 minutes. He's doing something at the moment, but he'll be coming on in about 15 or 20.
Well,
those who are watching, the over 200 people watching this live stream, if you're waiting for Destiny, you can go make some popcorn, check your phone for a little bit.
Well, look, as there are 200 people watching, I don't get the opportunity to abuse quite so many people. So fuck you to all 200 people. You're all pricks.
Oh,
there you go.
I think that they are lovely people who have excellent taste.
Well, that's not what you were saying off air. Off air, you were saying they were all subhuman garbage.
Kevin uses reverse psychology on that.
I do, exactly. Absolutely. I am the greatest. I am the greatest driver of people to Kristi's channel by abusing them. Honest, it works perfectly. Yes. What was I going to say? Yeah, before Destiny arrives, then, and the chat takes a different turn. Should we deal with the Andy Warski thing as well?
Yes. One thing too we can talk about when we finish the Andy thing is to what extent should we associate sorry, I'm having a really hard time with my words tonight. You know why? Because I didn't practice my Hamilton raps before we came on air.
It's because you're American.
That's what I normally do.
Americans don't have a great grasp of the English language. It's fine.
Yes.
It's fine.
Well, you can usually pronounce the words though. But so anyway, getting back to my point, there's I think with this information out there, people who go on Warski, people who have JF on, what does that say about them? And I think that's something that we can talk about later. But yes, the Warski update, right? So it wasn't sort of bad enough that these discussions were being had. This whole unhappy situation came to light. There was also the problem that in the last 24 hours or so, Right Wing Watch put up an article and part of a blog that shows Andy Warski admitting to taking off a condom in the middle of sex, which in and of itself isn't a problem, but he didn't inform his partner. I think it's best if we just let Andy speak in his own words. So I have here queued up the video, which you got briefly to hear before, accidentally, my mistake, Entschuldigung, meine Fehler, meine Freundin. So we're going to listen to Andy's, I don't know.
Do we need German interspersed? Is this really not a dark enough fucking podcast as it is? God damn it.
Well, I decided to go for permanent residency, so I'm trying to speak more German and think more German. So now it's always running in the back of my mind. Occasionally it comes to the fore.
I wonder if as a white person you will be as hated as the other immigrants the AFD don't like. I wonder. It's a thought, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm probably one of the good immigrants.
Exactly.
Yeah, the whole, oh no, not people like you're okay. Oh, why am I okay?
Well, whenever next time, if that happens, whenever there's a story in the press about an immigrant crime wave in Germany, I'm going to blame you.
Yes, it was me. I was the immigrant crime wave.
Kristi is robbing thousands of people all across Germany. She's amazing.
Yeah, it gives a whole new meaning to like the blue tide. It's just taking 20 euro notes. That's the blue tide me going across Europe.
This is completely irrelevant to the topic.
That's okay. We need a little bit of a break. We're gonna have.
There was a fantastic story from the Republic of Ireland. Genuinely true. I don't know the exact words off the top of my head, but it doesn't really matter. But what happened was they were finding out that because, for those who don't know, in Europe you can travel when you get your driving license. You can then travel anywhere in the EU and drive. Okay, your driver's license is absolutely valid anywhere in Europe. And so what they found, the Garda, the Irish police force, was that there was a particular Polish driver who was committing all kinds of speeding offences all across Ireland, but simultaneously, and they couldn't work out what the fuck was happening. And they found out that what was happening was, rather than taking down the names of the individual people from the driver's license, when the police were stopping people for speeding, they were taking down, I forget the words, it's like Zlaf Jabedak or something like that, which just meant driver's license in Polish. And so the Irish police were just putting down driver's license in Polish, thinking that was the person's name. And so it came out that there were thousands and thousands of occasions where they couldn't work out where this one Polish driver was committing all of these speeding offences simultaneously across the country, which I thought was quite nice. Anyway.
Yeah.
Which doesn't...
other languages.
Yeah, and not just that, but it just feeds into this, I suppose, xenophobic idea of the Irish not necessarily always being the brightest. But I can say that because I'm Irish, so it's fine.
Oh, I guess there's always that group, though. It usually depends. Like here in Cologne, it's people who in Dusseldorf who are not very smart. Actually, people across the river. It's still Cologne, but it's the wrong side of the river. And they call them cross-eyed people on the other side. It's called the cross-eyed side of the river. That's a very historic name. It's probably very ableist, one would say now, but that is the tradition. Along with there's a statue in Bonn along the river where the statue is hanging on a wall, like quite up high, so you can't reach it or take it down or anything. And it's a guy dropping his trousers at the other end of at the other side of the river.
And this is the beauty. This is why the white nationalism, as currently constituted by these fucking idiots, is so ridiculous. Because even people from the same fucking city that happen to live just geographically in a different part of it, like you live on this side of the river and I live on that side of the river, and they fucking hate one another. And sometimes it's jocular, but sometimes it really fucking isn't. Sometimes it's very bad. Like in London, a lot of taxi drivers won't go south of the river after certain times at night, not because actually because lots of South London is actually perfectly nice gentrified areas. It's just a bigotry they have. They won't go there. So the idea that you can have people from Ireland and England and Germany and Russia all united when you can't get two people from two different fucking streets to unite together is ridiculous.
On the story of that the dropping trowel statue, it was destroyed during the Second World War in bombing. And when they reconstructed the wall and the area along the river, the people insisted on putting a replica back up. So they're quite attached to that little stick in the eye or whatever. Right. So often we do this in our hangouts, which is when we're talking about a really depressing topic, we will have a mental break. It's the equivalent of being on Twitter and seeing a cat video, and you just pause and watch the cat video or the dolphin video or the chicken video, whatever it is, to just take a break from Twitter and the shitstorm that it is.
Having mentioned earlier my research for the Descent of Manosphere, it's rather intense and incredibly bleak at times because you have to listen to rape apologetics and Nazi apologetics and indeed rape advocacy and Nazi advocacy. It's all very bleak. And so I have to go and spend some time with my cat, chill out, watch some sport, fucking intravenous Guinness and just chill. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's worth doing that when you're broadcasting. It's much more intense, and so even half an hour of talking about this person's a fucking rapist is really, really intense. So it's best to just chill and take a break.
Some little sidebars. Yeah. All right, so let's get back to the shit. Here we are already.
Let's descend down into the fucking moral basement once again. Yes.
Here we go. All right. So we've got Andy's talking about his own stealthing of a drunk woman.
This is the story I was telling. The condom was too tight, like it was hurting my dick, and she was drunk. So during the sex, I pulled my dick out. And
maybe you were just in the wrong hole.
No, I pulled the condom off. No, it was like I didn't get the proper fucking Trojan ones.
By the way,
it was some random gas station one.
Check. Yeah. Yep. Listen out for the additional piece of racism he throws in for no fucking reason as well. Just a cherry on top of the shit pie.
That were so tight. I'm like, this is like Asian fit.
Fucking bullshit ones.
Yeah, it was like Asian fit or something. So I roll it off. Yeah, and then I fuck her without the condom on. But I was hammered. Like I pulled it off, and she was mad at me after. She's like, "What the fuck? You pulled off the condom?" Yeah, sorry. But I pulled out and everything. And then I was like, next day, I'm like, "Oh my god, what did I do?" And I went to the fucking walking clinic.
Well, what year did you do that in? Because that's rape today.
Yeah, stealthing is illegal now.
That was probably 2000.
Say over 7 years. Over 7 years is the
answer.
And
2009 probably.
Okay, that's how. Because after 2000, that became rape. That's now rape.
I'm just making sure the statute of limitations has passed, my friend.
Yeah.
We ended up
interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
So interesting point that I was told by someone who knows better than I. Apparently, for rape and sexual assault, Canada doesn't have a statute of limitations at all. So that's what he just said there isn't true. If it were illegal, then it would still be illegal now.
Right, but if it took place before it became a crime, it wouldn't be prosecutable. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Not saying it wasn't a crime. Not saying it wasn't wrong. Saying it's not prosecutable. Yeah. Okay. So this is only like another minute long, so we'll just finish it off before it have it in its entirety.
For that,
it doesn't matter to hashtag Me Too. You could have you could look what happened as he's in. Sorry, dick in this bitch's mouth.
Fair enough. But I was 20. I was probably 20.
I'm not. How does that make it better? I'm sorry, just to put in there, but like it's crazy that I was 20. But what does that change about you not getting consent? You were an adult at that point. So anyway, sorry. Back to it.
That's 8 years or 19. I was like late teens. What, you've never pulled off a condom halfway through?
No, I've never. I wouldn't know, man. That's like asking me if I've ever been struck by. What's it like being struck by lightning? I'm like, I've never been struck by lightning. I wouldn't know.
like banging a few times after that.
I never lived in a condominium, Andy.
Well, I thought this in my head because I was like scared because she was a hoe, right? But I was like,
so she was a hoe.
Yeah.
Right.
Not just that, but hang on. Is my I am. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, if you think that she is a quote unquote hoe, the fact that you fucked her makes you a hoe too, you prick. Just saying.
He's taking off his condom, but he's calling her. Yeah. Just.
I can only hope he got. I can only hope he got the fucking clap from it as well. Then fuck him.
Have something. Like I'm waiting for the fucking letter, right? So I might as well just keep doing it because if I have something, I have it.
There you go. The wise words of Andy Warski. All right, so stealthing.
By the way, just for a couple of points because my mic cut off and I was trying to speak. Yeah, the fact that he was 20, I have to agree with you. You'd been legally an adult for 2 years at the very least. Depending on what jurisdiction it was. But so that's not an excuse. And secondly, just because you pulled out, just a quick note for people, sperm can be released at any point during the sexual process. So don't think that just because you pull out, it's not going to get the person pregnant.
Yeah, and he said we had sex afterwards. Like that consent is a thing that happens in the moment. It doesn't matter if she consented to having sex with you later if you took off the condom and you didn't inform her and then she re-gave consent and proceeded. Like this, the logic of this of, oh, well, if I had sex with her afterwards and she was okay with it, it couldn't have been rape.
Well, exactly, yeah. And not just that, but I mean, people who are abused in relationships often continue to have sex in order to placate a dangerous person. Doesn't mean it's not rape.
The thing,
and he clearly was gaslighting her because she was angry with him, and he's, what are you so mad about? Like, and that is just a typical abuser's trick, you know, of making it sound like there was something wrong with her, being upset that basically he was, you know, I mean, at the point he took his condom off, the sexual act that was going on was not the one that she consented to. She consented to protected sex, to sex where she had some reasonable expectation that, you know, either diseases or the possibility of pregnancy were things that she was being protected from. And the minute he took the condom off and then proceeded to do what he wanted to do without informing her, there was no consent. Like, that consent was gone because it was it's a different
sorry,
thing.
I was just going to ultimately, he knew exactly what he was doing was wrong, because he's now changed his tune and now seems to be at least partly claiming that it slipped off. To which I have to say, hang on a minute, it was really tight around your cock.
Yeah, that makes
then all of a sudden it was completely not tight whatsoever. And at no point did you go, I wonder why those two states of affairs have changed now. Why is it no longer, oh, my condom slipped off? Fuck off. No one believes you. That's a lie.
It was so tight, it was hurting. And then what, it just like rolled up and popped off like a sock that you push off, you know, you roll up and you push off the top of your toes.
Well, exactly. What? Not just that, but what, you wouldn't notice it not being tight as fuck anymore. Like, what, did you suddenly lose all feeling in your cock? Fuck off, man. It's just such a lie. It's such an obvious lie. But that's the thing. His fans are such rape apologist idiots, so they'll probably buy it.
Well, you'd have to be really stupid to buy that. Like,
well, yeah, but we're talking about Andy Warski fans. Of course, they're fucking stupid. Jesus.
I mean, that's, to me, it's sort of an insult to my intelligence that he's even coming out with that. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Please.
What I noticed listening to it again,
and now I'm sorry. 9 years later, you're going to sit here and have a giggle about something that happened when a condom accidentally fell off. No, like, that's here. I have this great thing that I just came up with to share with you all. This like random thing that happened 10 years ago. That is such. Do not insult me that way. All right. We know you're fucking lying. We know you did it on purpose. We know you knew it was wrong. You had no concern for her. You don't give a shit about her. You know, you were all worried about your own possibility of having, you know, something bad happen. You didn't care that she might get pregnant when she wasn't prepared to. You didn't care that she might get a disease from your stanky ass. God.
Well, she shouldn't have been messing with his ass. That's an entirely different thing. I don't know what's going on there.
Well, I noticed when he was talking about it, there's that moment where he said, what, you've never taken a condom off during sex? And this sort of like, am I right, guys? Moment. And they're like, no.
Vadim's in the chat. Vadim, do you want to come on? You might as well invite every fucker.
Right. Well, I'll send him a link in a second. Let me finish my point. That's okay. Then you guys can talk, and I'll be running the back show of my own channel's program.
There is also a lawyer who wants to come on too. So everybody should come on. Let's all be on. We'll just all sit and talk about rape.
Yes, Sir should contact me on my DMs on Twitter to explain how I can get the lawyer the link, and I can also reach out to Vadim after this. So first there was the "Am I right?" kind of thing, you know, and I honestly don't. I agree with you mostly, Chrisiousity, but in part I disagree, a small part, and that is he was being selfish. He wasn't thinking about her risk of pregnancy. He was concerned about his sexual gratification in the moment. And I don't know, though, that he really thought what he was doing was wrong. And this was the thing that motivated the tweet that I sent, which is my second point, that when people get offended at the slogan, teach men not to rape, the reaction I've gotten on Twitter from people who find that statement offensive is they say, people know that rape is wrong. Men know that rape is wrong. You don't have to teach men not to rape. Well, the thing is, rape is not just like a moral issue, it's a legal issue. And consent and understanding what consent is under the law, if you, that you do have to teach men, apparently you had to teach Andy Warski not to rape, because he didn't know that that was a crime when he committed it. And so it's not just don't teach, you know, or teach men not to rape. I think we should have consent courses as part of our health courses, because women too might not realize that they've a crime has been committed against them when a man does this. They might just be angry and upset and worried about pregnancy, but they might not know the law. And so this is why we have to teach people about rape, and we have to make sure men understand where the lines are and what consent is. Teach them not to rape, right? And it's about getting consent. So that was my point. And now I'll kick it back over to you guys while I furiously work the magic to bring more guests onto the show.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. For the second night running, Kristi's going to run, like as she says, the back channel, because she did last night to Mike's Dutchbury, which was a lot of fun. People should go and check that out. Much more humorous, although we were dealing with the alt-right as well, so serious stuff as well. But yeah, so thank you to her for that. Anyway, I don't know if you had a serious point to make. I just thought I'd throw in a plug for our little chat yesterday.
Yes, and it was to do with her, you know, I guess that she's right. Now that she brought it up that way, he didn't know it was, at least he didn't know it was rape. Or if he had some idea that it was wrong, he didn't know exactly how wrong it was or why, which is amazing to me that you would, like, if I come up to you and have sex and then afterwards say, I use the old pinhole in the condom trick, you'd be out of your mind. Like, you can't do this to people. All right, that's not okay.
I don't know if I don't know how the law works in Canada, but I presume it would work on the same basis. The ignorance of the law does not exempt you from the law.
Oh no!
Just because you didn't know that it was, just because you didn't know it was illegal. Not that I'm saying this wasn't necessarily legal, because, like I say, there seems to be some ambiguity as to whether it was or not. But just because you didn't know it was illegal doesn't mean you can't, and indeed shouldn't, be prosecuted.
Yeah, and the thing about in America, it's really awful, because there are states where certain things are the law, and then other states where the law is completely different. And it's really frustrating.
That would annoy the fuck out of me. The idea of having that federal system, and I understand why all of that sort of thing takes place, but the idea that in one state a thing is perfectly fine and in another it's like, that's not a country then, is it? That seems ridiculous to me. But
Vadim.
Whatever.
Hey, am
I pronouncing it correctly? Because that's how I pronounce it, but I might be saying
no, that's exactly how you pronounce it. And
Vadim, like that.
Hey, everybody, what's up? Yeah, actually, it's commonly mispronounced, so don't worry about that. You nailed it.
Yeah. So less fun subject.
Yeah, it's something that I was kind of getting some heat for, I don't know, talking about yesterday on Twitter, and I kind of I had a couple points that I wanted to bring up, and I haven't listened to all of the Hangout, so maybe this has already been repeated. But one thing that I just found personally really crazy about the situation is that, this article was published by Right Wing Watch, and I believe that the terminology, I believe they never actually used the term rape. I think that they used the term sexual assault several times, which can mean, of course, a whole number of things. It can mean rape, and it can mean things that are far less severe than rape. So both he and all of his fans have gotten up in arms over the fact that that term was used. And usually, like in a lot of the complaints that you'll see on Twitter, they'll like say that they used the word rape. They didn't. But the crazy thing is that his friends multiple times use the word rape. And there's no like element of like, you know, kind of just mocking him or them, because I mentioned this to a few people and they were like, oh, they were just busting his balls. No, there's nothing that really implies that from the way it sounds.
They were having this sort of, oh, we're getting an echo, by the way.
From me?
Headphones. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can hear myself back.
I'll mute myself for a second. I've been trying to find, for some reason I'm having a problem with that, but I'll mute myself right now.
Okay. You know, I was just going to add that argument is absolute nonsense. They were clearly not busting his balls. They were clearly having an actual, albeit broad strokes, but detailed legal argument about the statute of limitations and what law came into effect in what year. They weren't having a joke. They were having a legal discussion.
So this is probably a good time to say hello to the wrong bishop.
Yeah,
hey, the wrong bishop.
I'm sorry, real quick. I wanted to say that I hope I'm not echoing, but I've been having like some sort of weird issue with my computer, so I'm going to try and resolve that. I may not be able to chime in for a while.
Yeah, your sound coming through is fine. It was just we were picking up Kevin in the background.
Yeah, when I was talking, I could hear myself back through your speakers, but that seems to have corrected itself now. So I don't quite know what's happened. So you seem okay now.
Cool.
So the wrong bishop, if you want to introduce yourself, give your background, give your take. Yeah.
Sure. I'm basically a YouTuber, an NTSCW YouTuber, but by day I am a lawyer. I'm not a litigator. I don't do litigation, but I do transactional trademarks. But in a sense, I went to 3 years of law school, so I may as well use my litigation knowledge that I learned during law school to kind of help you guys out.
You have a lot more than anyone in the room, so please.
Yeah.
We appreciate your expertise to the extent that you've mastered your 3 years of law school. So yeah, please go ahead.
I wouldn't call it master, to be honest. So so which part are we talking about? Which case in particular do you guys want to know about, or you guys just want to maybe a summary of kind of the stuff that I've kind of covered on my own like legal streams, looking at the documents?
We did it with JF first and then Warski. So if you want to do that in the same order.
All right. So the thing about JF is that he's a very peculiar boy, and he's not very good at being a lawyer. He thinks he is. He is just completely awful about it. And actually, one of the things is that it's actually much worse than it looks. So first of all, what happened with JF in a kind of timeline manner is that he met this woman. I think it may have been a professor at Duke University in North Carolina. And they got into a quick marriage, and they had a baby. He seems to be obsessed with having children, as many children as possible, according to kind of the psyche evals that he had to go through his divorce. And they met, they got married, they started to have a child, and then he became like very controlling. He became very insecure about his own place, his ability apparently to please women, and in general he kind of like hinted at his insecurities, and became really like he started spying on this poor woman, and started, you know, just being emotionally abusive. I don't think there was any physical abuse. I to be perfectly honest, I don't think he's capable of physical abuse. He's not the tallest, most physically imposing person there is. But kind of the result of it was that she started filing for divorce, and you know, I'm not entirely sure how the divorce documents kind of became leaked, because they shouldn't have leaked. I don't think they're actually available in public. But as a public, as the internet, we did get a hold of the divorce documents, and what we found was that JF is kind of a shitty person, and in many different ways.
I think we've kind of muted ourselves, but I know I kind of went, so I'll do that just as, he's kind of a shitty person is a light way of saying it. Yeah.
Yes, a very shitty person. Just from the divorce proceedings, we find that he's just controlling, and he's actually a deranged person. You know, the thing about a divorce is, and I worked very briefly in kind of like when I was still like going up in law school, like quite briefly with the probate courts here, and there's always two sides of a story with a divorce. There's always what he said, she said. Well, the thing is that by JF's own admissions, by JF's own documents, he comes off as just someone that's very deranged, mentally deranged, and you know, you can maybe forgive that if he was going through some stressful times. But there's a lot of stuff. For instance, he threatened to take the child while the child was still in the mother's womb, to take the child to back to his native home of Canada. The thing is that the child was still in the mother's womb, so he couldn't kidnap the child. He couldn't just take the child out and take him. So the mother was actually very baffled that he may do something to the child while she was still pregnant. He also, after the child was born, he was given, supervised visitation in the hospital, and there's a form that he has to write in. And in the form, he started sending threats and saying that the people who were keeping his child from him, the people who were supposed to go and who were supposed to oversee the supervised visitation, that they had no authority to take the child, that he was just going to take the child and flee. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Fortunately, the mother was warned about this, and unfortunately, JF wasn't able to. What amounts, functionally speaking, I don't think on a legal sense, but functionally speaking, I would say it amounts to kidnapping the child and just going off on back to Canada. But it kind of shows that he is a very deranged individual, and that kind of just, between others, there was a psyche eval as well in the later parts of the document, which kind of included some stuff about, it kind of pointed at JF being kind of having delusions of grandeur, this kind of belief that he is infallible and it's incapable of making errors. And I think you actually can kind of see that in his streams. I've made a lot of videos on the and the Warski streams. You can kind of see this thought that this man does not believe he's capable of making mistakes. He actually many times unironically says that he has a perfect memory, and that if there's a disagreement about the facts, it wasn't that he forgot or that he might be just misremembering the fact. It was because the other person misremembered the fact because he has a perfect memory, and that really shows on his psyche eval. And I would really recommend. I mean, it's not a legal document. It's just a doctor kind of expressing his this JF psychological situation. And I would really recommend anyone who wants to kind of get a grasp of what insane this person is and how dangerous this person is at the end of the day, to read it, because he is found to be very manipulative. He's found to be very just these constant attempts at lampshading everyone around him to just kind of forget about his insecurities and to let down his insecurities, and to be honest, it's quite scary. But that's basically the first kind of case we have on JF. That's the first time that JF went to quote unquote court, because I believe that all of this he did on a pro se. He was trying to defend himself. He believed that him as a doctor, he could just use Wikipedia to learn about the law and defend himself, and obviously he failed that.
I briefly earlier in the stream, I took people through the court documents where the young girl, the mentally incapacitated girl's parents tried to get, and indeed did, thankfully, get custody, guardianship over the woman. And he appeared pro se and appeared, like you say, I think, frankly, rather delusional. He didn't seem to know and seemed to get rather frustrated when the court would say, well, that's not possible, or that's, you can't legally. Like, he seemed to be convinced that this woman was his fiancée and that she was pregnant, even though that wasn't legal, and there was no evidence whatsoever that she actually was pregnant.
You know that?
Yes, exactly.
I just wanted to chime in with one quick thing. Sorry.
Sure.
What you guys are talking about reminds me of the fact it's sort of simultaneously a very funny but kind of horrifying aspect of all this. I believe with the 19-year-old girl, he told her that if she got pregnant, he would be able to help her give birth to the baby at home because he had experience with monkeys.
I think that was in the past marriage. He was trying to force.
That was the past marriage? Okay, I'm making things up. God. But still, I just, the whole, when you guys are talking about him having delusions of grandeur and believing that he's far more capable of things than he actually is. He also, I mean, this is probably him just knowingly BSing, but he apparently told the 19-year-old girl that he was going to get her a cooking show.
Yeah. So the thing about the 19-year-old girl, and it's actually, to be honest, one of the most facepalm moments I ever had in any kind of legal situation. And to be honest, I used to have a very kind of liberal on this, like liberal kind of opinion on pro se litigants. But after looking at how JF messed all of this up, I am now a firm believer that kind of going pro se is actually very dangerous. And it's actually something that wastes everyone's time. I've changed my opinion on pro se litigants just by seeing how just completely messed up the case and just wasted everyone's time. So the thing about the 19-year-old girl was that while all of this kind of divorce thing was going on, the JF kind of went on many drunken presence streams, and apparently a fan of this girl, a fan of JF, was this girl, this 19-year-old that was mentally challenged, and apparently she hit him up, it looks like, and they started talking, and apparently, according to JF, they fell in love. He fell in love with this mentally challenged 19-year-old girl, and it was actually, and I want to kind of dispel this notion that she was, just high functioning. She had high functioning autism, and yes, the doctor did describe her as high functioning autism, but the doctor also said that this girl could not subtract 7 from 93 and could not spell Houston backwards. That's basically kind of the cognitive abilities you have on this scale. So as I was saying here,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I took them through that court document, like I say, and the Rosa Gonzalez, the MD, and her analysis,
yes.
And she said that she wasn't capable of even consenting to dental work, let alone marriage or contracts or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'd like to chime in real quick, and I know that this is total speculation, but a part of me thinks like maybe he knew what he was getting himself into, and he wanted to impregnate this woman purely because he knew he could have her, bear a child, and then prove that she was an unfit mother and very easily take the child from her and raise it himself, which it seems like, he wanted to do in these other relationships.
Yeah, it would be far easier to control her and that child in that scenario than it was when he was with the professor from the university in his first marriage.
Yeah, and to Destiny, welcome to the stream, by the way. Before you talk, I just want to put out quickly that we know he's got form, as they'd say, on abusing positions of power and of imbalance in relationships, because he was also having a relationship with an undergraduate, like somebody under him.
Yeah, I know who it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's already crossed lines in terms of having position of power over someone or authority and having a sexual relationship. So it's not like he's never done that before, and it would be surprising that he would abuse someone like that.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think it's not that he doesn't abuse someone. It's just like his goal wouldn't be to take the child. I spoke to so much of Jeff before he started to grow up and become a big boy on YouTube or whatever. He was like the guy that got me into philosophy because of our early discussion. So like talking about it now is really interesting. Understanding everything that JF says is actually really easy. And a lot of people have a really hard time with JF because some of the shit he says is so crazy, and they get like really like over analyzing every statement or whatever. Basically, JF lives in this world where he has like this, there's a name for this philosophy, I'm sure, but he has like this evolutionary psych view or evolutionary psych view of the world. And like, that's like his moral system. So the question you always have to ask is, what will allow you to make the most number of babies? And then to somebody like JF, that is the morally correct answer. And this, if you just remember to follow this will guide you down every single thought process that JF has, and you'll understand exactly how he thinks. I'm not even joking. It sounds like a troll, but like if you look at like this situation with the 19-year-old girl, the fact that she is autistic doesn't matter. The fact that his behavior was creepy doesn't matter, or that he's saying like all that matters is he found a way to propagate his genes, and she should have a way to propagate her genes, and the children they make will pass those genes on. That's like his view of every social issue, of every political issue, of every ethical issue. Always comes down to propagation of genes. I'm not even joking.
No, I've seen that with somebody that I knew in our PhD who was studying rational choice theory. Mm-hmm. And after a couple of years, he started to really live his life as everything was a balance of utility and costs in relationships. And mm-hmm. he had very bad relationships. And you do see this where people take a scientific theory and they start to embed it into their moral worldview. Another mm-hmm. case I would point out is probably Peterson. I think he uses evolutionary psychology to justify a lot of essentialist claims. So, I think that field, there's a danger of sliding from theory into practice in a moral framework that is misapplying the theory.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I definitely agree. The or sorry, do you want to?
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say the interesting thing that I noticed about this, and this popped up a lot with my discussions with Amosi about, because he's a guy that wants like no age of consent, that like 2-year-olds can consent to sexual activity. The thing that really interests me in these conversations about JF and the conversations about things that, you know, Andy and the condom and everything, I think you guys were talking about that earlier, is I noticed that everybody has a really hard time understanding like sexual dynamics. And there's like a lot of weird stuff where I start talking about these and I realize that nobody has any idea what they're actually talking about. So like here's an example, okay? The JF stuff with that 19-year-old girl, the fact that she was mentally retarded, honestly, in my opinion, and maybe I shouldn't say mentally retarded, high functioning autist, developmentally delayed, whatever your term of choice is here, like isn't even really the worst part of that scenario. Like if you present all the facts of that case, regardless of any mental disability, it's almost as bad. Like you have a 19-year-old girl who has never lived alone before, who's never lived apart from her parents, has never had a boyfriend, has never like worked a job and lived on their own. Like I should think she had a part-time job, was convinced by a 30-plus-year-old man to move across the country without talking to her parents, without telling any friends, with the sole purpose of putting a baby in her within the first week of her living. Like all of these details on their own are very fucking creepy. And not creepy, but like really predatory. And the fact that like a lot of people will try to counter, like, okay, well, she was able to drive. It's like, dude, like that's like not even relevant to anything here. And I noticed in a lot of these conversations about like sexual assault or rape, like people have a really bad idea of like what informed consent means or what it means to be in a position of power over somebody.
Can I throw something in here? Because it's I think it does matter that she had intellectual disabilities in the sense that there is a reason that women who have these sort of developmental disabilities are so very vulnerable to sexual assault. It's something to 7 to 8 times the rate of other women in other situations, similar situations. And it's because they're very attractive to predators. You know, and it's very easy for them to get away with this crime. They are not, they make, we sort of reviewed some of this, they make poor witnesses in cases, or DAs believe that they will. They are not believed. They are easily manipulated. You can convince them. There's something that I think that that Kristi's going to be linking below, where a woman, she had been raped by these 2 people that were living in the household that she lived in at the time. And the mother was trying to convince her, this was, you told them to do it. This was you, you know, and they actually had her on tape saying this to her, and they actually went after the mother as well. But if that had not been on tape, you know, and if she had been able to convince this woman of that, you know, she would have gone in and said, no, I told them to go ahead. I told them to do it, which is not what happened. You know, it's, there's a lot. So it doesn't surprise me that somebody like JF would go and specifically find somebody who had these kinds of developmental disabilities and who was vulnerable to this sort of thing.
My problem when I have these conversations, and I'm going to trigger a lot of people saying this, but like the problem that I have when I have these conversations is that when we talk about like, why is pedophilia wrong, or why is taking advantage of somebody with developmental disorders wrong, is that people fall back on these answers. It's like, well, you shouldn't do anything with children because they're children, and that's just wrong. Or we shouldn't do anything with developmentally delayed people or people with mental retardation because it's wrong, because it's bad to do it. But people seem to have a really poor understanding of like, well, why is it wrong? Because understanding that is really important. And the reason why I say this is because in regards to this specific girl, like you get lost in the weeds really quickly. People are like, well, she wasn't that retarded. You know, she drove a car across the country. Like, how dumb is she? And it's like, okay, well, like, let's look at the cognitive process going on here. Like, what reasonable person would leave their family, move cross country to get impregnated by a guy that she doesn't know that well? Like, these are not the thought processes of a reasonable person. Like, even if she wasn't mentally disabled, this is really, really, really fucking wrong and really bad. Like, it should be really obvious. Not to downplay the fact that she does have a mental disability, and I do agree that that's disgusting too, but I think understanding like how wrong it was, even regardless of that, I think is really important.
So I was a case manager, human rights officer with people with intellectual disabilities. So that's sort of where I come from. And I think that it's important for people to understand that a person could be very high functioning in one way or in a certain scenario and have no comprehension of, you know, just even basic cause and effect in another one. And that appears to be where she was at. And I had seen similar situations when I was case manager where things like this happened. And you could say, oh, this person can play the piano. They can play like a, you know, like a maestro. They could be on stage and yet they can't, you know, going to the bathroom is a difficulty for them, the process of that. And it's because our brains are funny things, you know. When you think about the cognitive process of lying to somebody or figuring out how somebody, whether or not someone is lying to you, that's actually a very cognitively sophisticated thing that you're doing. You're just not aware of how sophisticated it is. You're not aware of all the sort of links that your brain is taking to take in information and compare it to things that you've seen before and understand what's going on. So for a person who has autism, they can very easily be manipulated. Sometimes, you know, I'm just saying that there are cases where a person might have autism and have no comprehension that they're being manipulated. They're just wide open to it because that link isn't there for them. Their brain isn't catching it. So I just want to communicate this to people who are out there saying, well, she could drive, so she could do this. Like, no. And this is not to say that people can't have wonderful lives and very full lives, or that there aren't people with autism who could very easily consent. You know, it's about the individual person because it's a spectrum.
We saw earlier in the stream, obviously, I read out the thing, and we had from two separate psychiatrists them confirming that she wasn't able to understand cause and effect and have informed consent. The second one, the more detailed of them, said that she wasn't even able to consent to dental work. I mean, that's someone who is not able to consent to sex then, clearly.
Yes,
Yeah,
and the thing is that in the JF spins this, actually. JF says that these were not psychiatrists who said this. These were lawyers. And he lies, and he outright lies. He lied it multiple times, and I have it on clips, multiple times lying, because they were, if you actually read the court documents, these are actual psychiatrists who said that.
Yeah, we're going to, I should have given her the link before to post below, but after this is posted, I'll post a link to the exact documents that I was reading from earlier, and it's from a woman called Rosa Gonzalez, MD, who is a trained psychiatrist, court-appointed psychiatrist. It's not the lawyer that was saying that; it is a doctor that was saying that. Yeah.
And on the issue of him being her driving, my dad told me the story that he was driving a tractor when he was 5.
Yeah.
You know? And so driving, if you think about it, okay, is it more complicated to get on a highway and drive for a really long time? Yeah. But if you multiply like a 5-year-old to a 10-year-old, a 10-year-old could probably handle it, right? So when you think about what processes you have to do while you're driving, yeah, there are some judgment skills there in terms of speed and distance and things like that. But that's very different from understanding the implications of the changes to your body and the demands of having a child, you know?
Yeah, and this is actually specifically addressed in multiple questions of these. In one question, or in one statement, one of the psychiatrists said that she would be able to drive perfectly fine on her own, but if she ran into any trouble and she had to stop, she would have to call her parents to figure out what to do. That was a specific statement in one of the documents.
Yeah, so, and this...
sorry, I was just going to say, that was from the document we read out. Yeah, it said that if anything were to happen, the only response she could have was to ring her parents.
Yeah.
And that's not someone who's really capable of controlling it.
And she also proved her kind of inability to, I don't like to speak of it this way, but kind of like her inability to understand this when the psychiatrist specifically asked her, like, do you know what JF's revenue is? Or do you know how much money he makes? And she had no idea. And she asked, like, what would you do if he decided to leave you and you were pregnant? And I think that's when she went quiet for like 5 minutes and then said afterwards, like, you know, I really like cats or something. Like, just
Yeah.
like not that. Yeah. Ugh.
It's
Yeah.
and he is an educated person. He should have been able to make this determination. He just didn't give a shit. Like, I'm sure that he knew in conversations with her after a week, you know, that she was having these sort of communication issues and that she wasn't always able to respond quickly or appropriately.
Mhm.
You know, he knew.
But this is the thing. This is the central point in understanding JF, though, is that these issues don't matter because the only thing that matters to JF is the propagation of genes. So whether or not she is mentally disabled, whether or not she isn't able to consent, these literally do not matter to him and in his moral system.
That actually reminds me when you had a conversation with him, when all of this kind of came out and was first a hot topic, you guys, I believe, talked on a Warski stream.
Yep.
And the moment that you got off the call, he basically said that your entire goal was white genocide.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because the girl that he got fired from his university for having for the undergrad that he was trying to pressure in a relationship is Chinese. And then the mentally retarded 19-year-old girl is Hispanic. So I'm not really sure what white genocide you think is being committed. Yeah, I don't know.
And I'm sorry to kind of, I need to turn my camera on and just.
Oh, how adorable.
That I've got this going on right here.
You're locked now.
Anyway, I'm sorry. That's not.
Well, I'd like to mention the wrong
CC is the star of the
bishop.
show, so I mean that's glorious. Yeah.
I think the wrong bishop, because I did watch your video quite some time ago, and I think that you had some important points about those people who would like to say that everybody in the court was sort of lying or out to get JF, which I don't think a reasonable person would assume anyway. But you had brought up just exactly what they would be risking if they were to do something like that for some crazy reason.
Yes, actually, it's one of the first things that they teach you in law school is the rules of professional conduct and how important they are and how much trouble you would get if you violate any of these rules. You basically lose your entire career. So Rule 3.3 of the rules of professional conduct, I believe, forbids attorneys from making outright lies to the court. You know, you can play around with the truth, and that's why kind of attorneys get a lot of, flack for being liars, but like making outright false statements is a big no-no. And every single lie that you tell as an attorney, you're basically putting your entire career and maybe under certain circumstances, your freedom, you might be even like risking kind of criminal litigation. So it is a huge thing to lie. And actually, one of the things is that when you're kind of conducting this litigation, lawyers actually threaten each other when someone tries to sell like some kind of minutiae lie to report each other to like the bar association just for saying a small kind of misleading statement. But so the idea that a lawyer for this kind of small kind of custody kind of guardianship case would just completely make a false lying statement is just preposterous. Two lawyers from two separate law firms would have to conspire to this.
They seem to spin this narrative like the lawyer that represented the girl was her own lawyer. Like she was an adult. It wasn't like the family like made her use their lawyer or something. And getting guardianship over somebody, that's a pretty high bar to pass. It's pretty hard to go to court and say like, hey, like I want to own this person, right? Which is kind of what you're doing when you're getting guardianship of somebody. It's a pretty hard bar to pass. So the idea that like all of this was just like done on a whim and that all the psych reports were faked and this, is really, really ridiculous.
And to tie into this to a larger discussion, sorry, just to throw this idea out there too, people in this community are highly critical of the concept of rape culture. And yet all these defenses and excuses and, I was 20 or I was drunk, that's part of rape culture. That's normalizing sexual assault. And it's just, for me, I think it's worth pointing out that for the people who complain about rape culture being ridiculous, we see in these cases that it's actually alive and well and really thriving in the alt-right, in the community, in the far-right community too.
Yes, I made that point like very clear because I'm not, you know, I didn't buy into the whole rape culture till I saw Andy Warski kind of bragging about this and being defended of it. I thought that it was kind of like I thought it was kind of overstated, you know, just not. But then I saw Andy Warski like the defense he was getting, and it kind of blew my mind how these people could, you know, just stand behind such disgusting acts, which was, and to be honest, I don't think it's controversial to say that what he did was sexual assault. And I'm not kind of trying to be a moral busybody or anything. It was sexual assault. And the fact that they deny it, the fact that they make excuses for it, just kind of really opened my eyes to just how, you know, of a culture that this is and how ingrained it is, and how dumb I was to kind of make that mistake of not seeing it in the first place.
That's not even the worst part. The worst part of it is that the same group of people, if you were to give them a story about a woman like poking holes in a condom, or a woman like missing a contraception pill intentionally to try to get her husband to get her pregnant, which is wrong and horrible, but like those people would be losing their fucking shit about that. Like, oh, like men should be able to have financial abortions. Like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. You know, but when Andy does it, it's just like a funny kind of bro thing, you know?
Or if you were to bring them the exact same story, but change Andy Warski for a Muslim.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing. I actually, I don't know if you guys know this, but I was the one that broke this kind of story. A viewer of mine actually messaged me and said, "Hey, you got to turn in on the Kumite. Andy Warski just said some pretty fucked up shit." And I'm like, "What?" So I was actually at work at the time, and I took a break just to hear what he had to say, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, and they were laughing about it. Andy Warski was actually laughing about bragging, committing what is exactly is condom sabotage, and that was just disgusting. That was absolutely disgusting, and I have no idea how anyone could defend this guy, but they are.
And throwing in some racism, as Kevin also pointed out, you know, casual racism as well.
Oh yeah, and he even had to like say it twice. God, I cringed because he didn't think they heard it the first time. Oh yeah.
And I wonder how Chris Warski, as an Asian North American, would react to that as well, because that seems sort of throwing him under the bus as well there. But
I haven't seen Chris in a long time.
Yeah, I don't know if he's necessarily on board with Andy's white nationalist direction, considering he would be kicked out of Canada because he's not white or whatever, you know.
Oh man, people have all sorts of crazy ways to rationalize that shit. It's insane. I was listening to, in one of my debates with Nick Fuentes, this guy is doing like soul math to prove that like his soul is like 91%. He's like, well, I'm 25% Hispanic or 50% Hispanic, but that 50% is Castizo Spanish people, which is like 75% European. So actually my soul ends up being like 92%.
Exactly. His name's Fuentes.
I know, that's the funny thing, dude. Or when we're in the debate when Tara hopped into the call and she starts being critical, or she's talking about how she would remove invaders from our land, which is a really nice way. You know, they always try to phrase like, well, we just want to remove, you know, aggressive invaders, and that ends up being every single person of color in their definition. And you know, by the end, somebody else asked her in the call, like, well, so why do you care so much about this? Are you American? And she's like, well, no, I'm not American. And it's like, well, why are you so concerned? It's like, well, for your information, my fiance is American, and I'm going to marry him soon, so I'll be American. It's like, aren't these exactly the type of people that you're complaining about, like that get to the United States?
Not just that, but Tara McCarthy is part Jewish and part Indian. She's more multicultural than most non-whites.
The funny thing is, but like when you talk to these people, they make the most liberal SJW arguments ever in favor of why they should be included in the white ethno state. Like, and I asked McCarthy that, or either I did or someone else. I was like, why should you be included in the ethno state when you're Jewish? She's like, well, I don't think that just my genetic ancestry being Jewish is important, as long as I can advocate, you know, for the same cause as these other people. And it's like, wow, it's almost like you're talking about how maybe race isn't the most important thing, and that ideologies can bind people together instead. Like, these are all the arguments that.
What about if someone was really like a really black guy was also?
Well, look at
would he be allowed in the ethno state?
Is it Braving Ruin? Is the guy on Twitter who's like half black who says he's not? Does anybody know?
He's half Egyptian.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Egyptian. Yeah.
Egyptian, right? Yeah.
I think this is going to sound like this is more multicultural than most places in the West are now.
Well, that's what, yeah, that's what I know. Like, you look at like some of the alt-right, like fucking poster childs, and it looks like a Disney Channel, like inclusive commercial. Like you've got Terry McCarthy, the half Jewish, girl. You've got Braving Ruin, the half Egyptian guy. Like all these different. You've got Fuentes, the the white nationalist. It's like, Jesus, like this is insane.
I actually heard a really hilarious clip from Tara. I don't know what it's from, but maybe some of you on Twitter know of the Liberal Sanity Project. It's just a Twitter user. And he made a video, and there was a clip where she literally said, now, I'd want to be in the white ethno state, but if it was determined that I had to move to India or something like that, I do that. I do that for the, for...
Yeah, not just that, but she doesn't have... She doesn't even have the fucking right to move to India. She doesn't have that legal right. India's a sovereign nation, for fuck's sake. That's the point. Where are these people going to go to? I mean, your average person from Atlanta or New York that's black doesn't have a right to move to Ghana. Like, what? It's ridiculous. It's
always funny to lean into the white nationalists. It's not really fair because most of them aren't obviously equipped to having a conversation. But when you start leaning into them on policy, it gets really funny. Alt hype, like you watch these people flounder so much. Like, okay, well, how does the white ethnicity work? It's like, okay, well, first we would suggest that hopefully they leave and we pay. I'll say, okay, let's get past all the bullshit. You have a group of people that don't want to leave your country. How do you make them leave? It's like, well, I guess we would have to use government force. Okay, so some of them will inevitably be killed. Once you've pushed them out, where do these people go to? Well, maybe they'll go back to their countries where they always say like where they came from, whatever the fuck that means, right? The countries of their ancestors came from, I guess. It's like, okay, well, how do you know those countries will even accept these people? Like, how is this not going to cause war? It's like all these like really stupid, like it's not like a thought out position at all.
Kristi, this is the exact point I was making to Mike Stutchbury last night. Do you remember that when you can back them into a corner and back them into a corner, and it always ends up being, it goes from being, well, we'd ask them nicely and we'd offer them cash to leave, to, well, basically cattle trucks full of dead Jews or whatever. That's always where it ends up.
Hey, guys. I need to get going, but thanks for having me on briefly. And I've been sitting in this really awkward position for
so cute, though.
The past. Yeah, I know. It's like when she gets up here, I really don't want to move.
Does anyone want to make the joke about there being two arseholes on screen? Come on, now.
You just did.
I love you both. Come on, now.
So yeah, guys. Thanks for having me on, and have a good one. And
did you say everything you wanted to say, Vadim?
Later. What?
Did you say everything you wanted to say? Any points left? Any last points, or are you good to go?
I guess just the one last thing that I'll say is you guys were talking about how unlikely it is that there would be lies in this court case. I think it also extends quite a bit to the Daily Beast article that was just released on JF. There are all these people who are saying things like they're not furnishing enough proof. Well, first of all, like they're taking really just JF's word for it on the entire story, it seems. And just what is the likelihood? I mean, like, obviously this woman did interview all these different people. These women discussed a pattern of behavior that's totally that's totally similar, but different people who don't know each other, who live in different corners of North America, are experiencing the same kind of behavior from this guy. I mean, it's so unlikely that all of these things would, I mean, the other, if they're not lying, then the other the possibility in these people's minds is the Daily Beast is making it up. And it seems like, that would be so easy to prove. It would be so easy for, you'd think that these people would come forward and say like, yeah, I didn't say that. So I guess I'm just saying that these people who are doubting the story, it's like their reasoning is so flawed, and I'm just amazed that it doesn't occur to them how flawed it is. But I guess that's what happens when, I don't know, when you're really biased towards someone that you like, or if you're just a fucking idiot. Either one of those things can do that. But yeah, that's really
maybe the atheist movement needs to call those sort of dude bros who will defend Krauss and the kind of the sort of the atheist version of the doubting Thomas. Like, you know, I like this guy, so I'm going to doubt everything so that I can hold him in non-guilt because there's not enough evidence. But
except the one thing I won't doubt is his word.
yeah.
Peace be upon him. I'm sure he's telling us the complete and total truth at all times.
The extra special thing about JF is
guys,
Okay, so yeah,
Bye. Bye, Vadim.
thanks for stopping by.
Right.
the extra special thing about JF is that like he doesn't deny anything. That's like the crazy thing. Like, could you imagine for 1 microsecond if there was like a slightly liberal figure that would admit to the shit that JF has admitted to, chain fucking 18-year-olds trying to make babies, so everybody like, holy shit, like they would have a field day with somebody like this. If you read like the threads on Poll about JF, like even the guys on 4chan have started to turn against JF because his life story is so insane and he's so unapologetic about everything. It's insane.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed. It's like when the article broke out, a lot of the alt-right was saying, oh, that's not true. That's not the case. And then JF kind of broke that entire narrative by just admitting and fessing up to everything and saying, I don't care.
I mean, I think like my favorite document from all the court stuff that we went through is just him debating that intake, the patient intake form. Did you see that?
Yep. I saw that. That was insane.
It's the perfect encapsulation of like JF's life philosophy. I think the idea that there's only one thing that matters, that he has the objective truth. Everybody else should bow and agree to his whim. That like it's like oof.
There's a god complex with him. He genuinely thinks of himself as sort of vaguely infallible, which is ridiculous because he's one of the most fallible people I've ever encountered.
Yeah, I think he says that unless you're quoting. Are you quoting the document?
He might have
no, I wasn't quoting
he literally said that in, I think one of the lines verbatim was something like, I'm like the most sane person I know or something. I think he says something like that in that 26-page like PI thing.
Oh god, he sounds like Trump. I'm one of the most sane people you've ever met.
A little bit.
And I should say, you know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with people having mental illnesses, and that doesn't mean that you can't go on and do things. It's just, but you have to treat them. Like when I had a child and I had very severe postpartum depression, I got help. And otherwise, if I had not gotten help and if I had refused to get help, I wouldn't have been safe to be alone with my child. Yeah, so that's why you do that.
I don't want people to think I'm being ableist toward anyone, frankly. But if JF can clearly see that the actions he's taking based upon his issues are demonstrably harmful to other people, it's incumbent upon him to try and get help. And not only does he not try and get help, he seems to revel and celebrate in the destruction he does.
Yeah, well, because he doesn't see any of it as a problem, yeah.
I think you hit a really good point, is that I'm actually a lot angrier with the alt-right people that enable this kind of behavior than to JF himself, because to be honest, you know, it's pretty clear that JF does have some mental issues that he can't, you know, deal on his own. But the idea that basically Andy Warski and the alt-right are all enabling this kind of behavior, to me is completely disgusting, and even more disgusting probably than what JF is doing, because at least he has an excuse. He's crazy.
Well, I think to a degree, Andy Warski, not to absolve him of any of that, but I think Andy Warski is to a degree become almost a victim of the JF manipulation, it seems to me. If you watch those streams, it seems like JF is the one in control there.
Yeah, Andy Warski is very much who I would put him as like it sounds weird to say this, but like a dumber version of Sarkon. Like he's just kind of like a useful idiot. Like I don't think, you know, he's kind of like a dude bro guy who is just very useful to people that want him to be like an outlet for these kinds of like extreme right types. I guess like in one way, like if I'm being totally human, I do feel kind of bad for him, because god damn, is he in like such a predicament that he probably doesn't fully even comprehend. Like when he's on like the Daily Show laughing about like extermination jokes, I don't know if he realizes like how fucked his head is. And I know, like, for instance, I know his dad doesn't agree with anything that he does politically. So like, yeah, he's just JF is definitely like the more manipulative party there, and I feel kind of bad that Andy has been kind of like taken for a while. But I mean, like, how bad can you feel? I don't know.
And he was not like he wasn't warned.
Yeah, exactly. He's been warned consistently. He's been told by people who have been his friends for a long time, and indeed even people like me I was never his friend, but was always happy to talk to him honestly and on a level playing field.
Sure.
He's an adult and he knows exactly what he was getting into, and now he's walked into the swamp willingly, and now doesn't seem to want to try and get out of the swamp, frankly, but he needs to.
Yeah,
Otherwise
he reminds me a lot of it sounds kind of mean to say, but he reminds me a lot of the Bunty guy on Twitter as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much the same kind of like very, very naive, end up being like useful mouthpieces for people that have like really fucked up thoughts. Yeah.
And there's a refusal to sort of admit that you can be wrong about shit, like, which is really weird. Like Andy, even in this, he'll change his story, but I think it was Tim Robert, Demotivator Opinion, who was saying, all you'd have to say is, look, I did a really bad thing. I was really drunk. I was young. I was stupid. I hate that I did this. I'm sorry for what I did. And I just want other people to know that they shouldn't do this. And I don't see anybody taking real issue with that. But the fact that he's like, nah, it's fine. It's all good. We should all do this. Why haven't you done that? Why haven't you taken a condom off during sex? I don't know what's going on with you. Like, that's where it's
the other guy's reaction is sort of quite funny and telling when he says, he says, oh, well, haven't you ever done that? And he said, no, I've never done that before. It's like asking me if I did X, Y, and Z. Like, the incredulity of him thinking, well, everyone's done that, right? No, we haven't fucking done that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's this big thing that I noticed when talking to a lot of these guys, which I've unfortunately done more than I cared to. Like, is this like attack, deny, pivot, like always. You never ever admit anything is wrong. I don't know if it's like a conscious thing that these people do, but oh my god, the attack and pivot is so frustrating. Like, you have to be it's like catching snakes or something, like trying to hold somebody down to a single point without them pivoting immediately to another topic. And no one will ever admit they're wrong about anything. I mean, Trump hasn't done it at all, and I mean, he's doing fine, so
Yeah, the old right. I don't know if Andy Warski necessarily it's an intentional thing, but I would advise you to look up a guy called Vox Day. He wrote the 16 tenets of the alt-right. And one of those, and it's sort of seen as all the closest as you get to like a rule book of the alt-right.
Yeah, I've read
one of those is was it to always be on the offensive, both literally and figuratively, and never admit that you're wrong, never admit to a defeat, ever. So from that perspective, I don't know if it necessarily applies to Andy Warski, because I think that would be giving him a level of research that I don't think he's.
Oh yeah, no, it's not. I don't think it's intentional. It's just something that becomes like I mean, I identify it as like kind of like fascist behavior, but it's like these types of people very much argue in this way, where you never give any ground. And it's not just these extreme types too. If you ever listen to people like Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck or these, the conservatives on the radio, or people like Sean Hannity or whatever, like it's very much the same. You never admit fault, and you always just chug along.
Yeah, keep moving the ball forward, basically.
Yep. Always, you have to keep your opponent on their toes. Like, yeah, why would you ever admit that you're wrong about anything? You just look weak doing it, so you just find a new place to attack and you pivot, or you pull a whataboutism. We elected Trump because he's not Hillary, but how many times do you criticize Hillary or Trump and hear somebody say, "Well, Hillary did it, Obama did it"? It's like, okay,
yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, like you say, Trump keeps doing it. Imagine if Obama had done half the crazy fucked up shit. But Trump, because he doesn't ever admit defeat, and the media are so pathetic at tackling it.
Like, I wish there was an alternate. Can you imagine a black man running for the United States with multiple wives in his past, being divorced? Could you imagine a black man who had an affair with a porn star, or was caught on record saying "grab him by the pussy"? Oh my God, it would be ridiculous. Like, it would be game over.
Oh yeah,
it was absolutely scandalous that Michelle Obama revealed her shoulders in one of the
or that Obama wore that tan suit or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Or asked for Dijon mustard on his hot dog. Jesus.
Getting back to the Warski thing, we kind of now have sort of with these two stories coming out, getting a lot of attention. The issue of, well, okay, so should people disassociate from hanging out with, like, if you Destiny or Kevin, you've been on interactions with JF and Warski before, is the right thing to do to sort of shun them, or is it to go on and ask about these things?
Wow, I don't know. I've personally stopped wanting to go on streams with Andy, mainly because of the incredible racism thing. Because he's not doing debate on that show anymore.
Right.
It's literally just, oh, here's one type of white nationalist debating another type of white nationalist over what type of white nationalism they prefer.
Yeah.
That's not debate. That's just fucking circle jerkery nonsense. So I'll have no part of it. But with the rape thing especially, I'd be sort of tempted to go on and say, look, here's the document. Explain this fucking document where the psychiatrist says this woman was incapable of, you know, of consenting, and therefore JF is a fucking rapist. Very simple. But I dare say, look, as we were just discussing, the pivot and obfuscate and, you know, deflect away from themselves and then attack you for something completely different would be the strategy they would always go for.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Destiny?
Nah, fuck that shit. I don't let any of those guys make money off of me. I always say if they want to talk, they have to come onto my stream now. But I think hanging out with them has actually been so damaging to my revenue stream that I actually don't want to do it anymore. It's actually like insane. These people are fucking lunatics. Like I have people like trying to dox like my child's mom and shit, and it's just way too insane for me. I can't like, I used to advocate that everybody should engage people in debate, but I can't do it anymore. I actually like totally 180'd my stance on deplatforming too. After I got banned on Twitter, I got like 20 people banned afterwards because we started like spam reporting like fucking everybody. Yeah, no, I'm way done like going onto their shows. I'm not going to do anything that like gets them money or anything. So I would never go on Andy's show in any structure or on any JF show with any structure. If they wanted to come on to mine to get dressed down, then maybe, but otherwise, no way. Fuck that.
That does seem to be a tactic of the alt-right in particular, is to basically terrorize people into not criticizing them.
Yeah, which is really sad, but like, and I hate to admit that because I can't really talk about that, but that is like a hard line for me. Like if I feel like my family's life is threatened, like, I mean, you win, like I drop it by default. Like, I don't know if you're some 14-year-old dumb fuck on the internet, or if you're like some 23-year-old dude who's got too much time on his hands, who's going to hunt people down. Like it's too much of a risk for me. So I mean, congrats, you win.
And talking about coming on your stream, if you ever wanted to invite me, that's fine. I would consider the request, of course. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I've got an outstanding request with Destiny, and his fans are asking for me, so I get to go on.
So I'm behind the queue.
Yeah.
Just cry.
Yeah. But yeah, I think this whole issue of, you know, who goes on their shows now, who associates with them, who's just going to shrug this off, or if there's going to be more of a backlash to this, because we also had within the atheist community, I can't say her last name because it slips my mind, but Christina, if someone else can save me.
Brad.
Right, and her video on Kraus and her interaction with him when he was acting inappropriately, very inappropriately. I don't know if you guys want to stick around and have a chat about that as well, if there's other things with the JF Warski stuff that we haven't covered that you want to.
I would say that there's one thing that I do want to cover, and that is kind of there's been a lot of speculation about whether what Warski did was legal or not. I specifically said that it shouldn't matter whether it's legal or not. It should be whether it's moral or not. But I do want to kind of stick up to that point. As far as I know, it's a legal gray area. It's something that if someone were to kind of ask a lawyer, they wouldn't say yes or no. They would say, I don't know. Because honestly to God, if you're in Canada, you know, there hasn't been a preceding case as far as I know. There's been some rumors that there was a preceding case, but there hasn't been a preceding case. However, in that sense, they have already kind of built up a legislative kind of framework for it to be considered kind of sexual assault and illegal. You know, the Canada already acknowledges that there is kind of a conditional consent to sex, and they have had multiple cases where they acknowledge the fact that consent can be removed like at any second, you know. So the idea that it's legal is I think saying that it's legal is very misleading, and also saying that it's illegal is very misleading. I just think it shouldn't even be a question. It's just immoral all the way around.
Yeah,
go ahead, Chrisiousity. Sorry.
No, when it comes to, because, you know, like I said before, in America, you could go across one state to another and have completely different laws. So when I say that I consider it rape, I mean it in almost like the dictionary sense rather than the legal sense. There was non-consensual sexual activity going on. I'm just going to call that rape because because the truth is we don't have always very clear statutes about these things, and we don't always know. I was reading recently, in Kansas, they had a woman whose husband blackmailed her into sex, when they were going through divorce proceedings, saying, well, I'll tell your family about this, that, and the other thing, and I'll expose these secrets that we had when we were married unless you have sex with me. And this was not rape, and so Kansas had to go and look up and say, oh, well, it is in other states. I guess we have to add this statute in our state. So like when you have those sorts of things, I don't think always asking whether or not something is rape should always just be considered a legal question, because it could be different anywhere.
Right.
I completely agree. And I'm sorry. Yeah, you hit up a very good point, Chrisiousity, in the sense that is it wrong to call someone that, if you're a pacifist, to call someone that's in the military forces and active duty a murderer? No, it's not, because you're referring to the actions that they did. You believe personally, in your opinion, that it's murder. It's the same reason why many of the kind of JF fans kind of like told me that what Destiny did was defamation. No, he saw the information. He saw what JF had submitted to do, and he considers that, in his opinion, to be rape, and that is completely fine, and that is completely allowed, and it doesn't really break any slander laws. It's you need a factual statement, and you need a factual statement that you knew was wrong. And I think that the analogy of of calling an armed forces official a murderer is the perfect analogy. You can have an opinion on what is or isn't wrong. These words, murder, rape, sexual assault, they are legal words, yes, but they're also they're also kind of moral words, and your morals can differ from what we consider the law. So it's kind of a moot discussion that they're trying to bring into the table, in my opinion.
On the issue of the law, I know in the U.S. it's not illegal in most places, or I don't think anywhere yet, in terms of stealthing as Warski described doing it. But 2 states, California and Wisconsin, had legislators, both women, who introduced legislation to make it illegal. The California one was very gendered. It comes from like a woman's sort of experience or report of sexual assault, whereas the one in Wisconsin that was actually authored by my friend, a woman that I worked with and knew back when I was in Wisconsin working Democratic politics. She got elected to office and she's doing great work. Hers would be more gender neutral, so that if someone destroyed a condom, it was the destruction of the condom that was the crime. It didn't have to be a man took his condom off during sex. So if a guy poked holes in the condom or a woman poked holes in the condom, they would equally be committing a crime. And I think that's the way to go forward on this issue. And I do think it should be a crime in law, not just a moral crime or a moral wrong. It should be. Yeah.
I completely agree with you on that one. It definitely should be. But and this is the problem.
Crazy feminist again, all about equality.
No, not at all.
I'm being ironic. I'm being ironic there too. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of weird because I've always been kind of like center right. And I'm actually very disillusioned with many of these people who I thought, I was supposed to be the reasonable side of the conservative kind of side, just completely going bonkers and accepting things that I would consider to be just absolutely preposterous. And to be honest, absolutely just it's proving kind of the feminist theory correct. And I'm a full believer now, even though I'm still kind of conservative.
You can be a critic.
Even though I'm always trying to be a market capitalist. I think that, to be honest, Kristi, I do say that you were right all along. All of these people are your assessment was completely correct. And as someone who has been kind of a passive fan, I didn't have much time to kind of get active in the community, but a passive watcher here and there. I gotta say, I think everyone owes you an apology. You and Francesca Ramsey and Anita Sarkeesian, an apology, because at the very least, on certain individuals, you were completely on point.
Oh God!
Now I'm gonna have to spend the next week deflating a fucking ego. Brilliant.
No. What I would say is, the apology is a fabulous first step, and that's great. But what's more important is the change in perspective and seeing things from a different way and being critical about things. That's actually the important part of having the discussions and pointing these things out. So I'm inspired by that.
Well, what I would say, and if something that I want to, if I could expand my platform, is to say that you don't have to kind of, you know, be an accomplice to all of this kind of awful, shitty behavior to be a conservative, to believe kind of in markets, to believe in kind of the idea of in kind of like capitalism in a sense, and it's something that I've been told multiple times. They told me, like, you're a bad conservative because you're punching right, and I'm like, no, I want to clean up my side, and these people kind of believe that fascists are friends, and I consider that to be just so un-American. It's not why I came to this country, you know.
Well, before you gave me the, you know, sort of the compliment that came out actually from more for feminist critique, out of it kind of hit me out of left field. I was going to say, I see so many people who used to consider themselves Republicans standing up and breaking with the Trump Republicanism they see. And, you know, I found myself retweeting Nicole Wallace and Michael Steele and, you know, Steve Schmidt. And there's a lot of conservatives that I find a lot of common ground with in protecting the institutions that our Constitution has provided us, and the abuses of power and the drifts towards authoritarianism. And I'm more than happy to stand with my American, you know, fellow Americans, whatever side of the political spectrum, if our goal is to protect our democracy.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, haven't we, Kristi? About we've both ended up agreeing with people like John McCain, who
Yeah.
And you think, well, that's magic.
Jeff Flake, Lindsey Graham from time to time.
I don't know about that. I hate McCain. I actually have a really big problem with this because I'm a pretty ardent capitalist, like very much so. Like even another time I'll defend capitalism to the death against other economic systems. But like if you are a conservative in the United States, you have no home. There is no like if you're a reasonable person, like, because Republicans sure as fuck aren't conservative. Like if you want to talk about conservatism or fiscal budgets, that doesn't mean expanding the war on drugs. That doesn't mean, you know, making things like drugs legal. That doesn't mean, you know, destroying your population's ability to work by screwing over your healthcare system. It doesn't mean expanding the military and imperialistic ideas of it. Like there's all these things that the Republican, it doesn't mean expanding the police state or the security state. Like there's a ton of things that Republicans do that aren't conservative ideas, you know, whatsoever.
Not just that, but militarizing the classroom now as well. Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah, these are just like really weird evangelical moral positions that are just like have nothing to do with, I don't know. That's ridiculous. Ugh.
Yeah. Oh, I'm in favor of a tamed capitalism. You know, I'm very much a social democrat.
Sure.
But what I see coming out of, you know, Republican Party now, it's defense of Russia. It's inaction on digital attacks on our country that are going on as we speak. And it's about defending a president or not talking out against a president who is violating so many norms about the office. And
it's about being a partisan hack, right? That's really what it's all about.
That's what it's become. And it's really threatening our democratic institutions. The courts have been a bulwark, but we really need a massive change at the ballot box. And I've seen Republicans calling for Republicans to vote for Democrats because they've lost faith in their party's ability to oversee the president. And that's so sad to me. That is the death of a political party.
Yeah, there might be some Republicans doing it, but that's not main. I just want to be very careful because I give zero credit to Republicans. Mainstream Republicans, the McConnells, the Paul Ryans, these people are
fuck those guys.
Not breaking. No, so mainstream establishment Republicans have absolutely, they will do whatever it takes to hold on to political power, regardless of what Trump says, even when it hurts them, right? Like mainstream Republicans are very much like Southern strategy-esque people. Like these people might be racist, but you better fucking believe a Paul Ryan doesn't want to have to go to the table arguing to put up a fucking wall. Like this is a Trump deal, you know, and it hurts the Republicans when they try to go to the table to negotiate on things like the budget or on things like DACA and immigration. Like they have to take these insane Trump policies with them to do it, but they do it because they're not going to you know, risk their political power. Although on one hand, I can almost sort of empathize with them because if they do buck Trump, then they're like fracturing and destroying their party. It's just a big clusterfuck of our whole voting system is like really fucked. That first past the post like only allows for two political parties, so a whole bunch of bad shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I'm talking more about like Steve Schmidt gave an impassioned defense of, you know, liberty, the Constitution, and protecting democracy. My people in my family have left the Republican Party. They've been so disgusted. They're still conservatives, but they can't bring themselves to vote for the kind of candidates that are, protecting. Well, in this case, it was Trump in particular. And I do find common cause with those previous Republicans or disaffected Republicans, because for me the larger goal is first protect the Constitution, and when we all agree on the rules and we get back to all agreeing on the rules and Congress fighting the president, not kowtowing to him, which is how it's supposed to be, then we can go back to fighting each other. But first we need to get the game or the rules of the game right.
The only issue that I have with like the McCain types is that they'll sit out there and they'll talk the talk and they'll give these big speeches and everybody will get behind McCain. But then when it comes time to vote, what the fuck? Where did he go? Like he's back on the towing the party line. And McCain did that so much.
Right.
Oh yeah, I wasn't defending McCain from that perspective.
Yeah, that's why I hate that. I'm really
the shit I've heard him say. You know,
there's like two people that I always have to make people do like a double take on, and one is McCain, where people are like, you're like, oh, McCain's like, man, fuck off. Look at his voting record. This guy doesn't back anything he says. And then the other is George Bush. When people, and I even call myself doing this, I was like, well, George Bush wasn't actually that bad. It's like, nah, George Bush was a pretty fucking bad president. Like, don't let Trump.
Lie, you know
what?
He took us to war on a lie. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
And double the size of the US debt as well. So, hold on.
I will say this. I used to be very proud of Mitt Romney. And I actually voted for him in 2012. And I used to be very proud of him till he kowtowed again to Trump and kissed the ring. That's kind of like, at this point, there's no Republican that I actually feel any connection to.
Not any elected ones. I think there are some grassroots, but...
Yeah, Mitt Romney basically came up with Obamacare when he was in Massachusetts, didn't he?
Yes, that's why I like him, because he is a compromise Republican, and that's kind of the type of kind of conservatism that I believe in.
He was a compromise Republican, yeah.
I'm sorry, are we talking Mitt Romney? I'm from Massachusetts.
Oh, when he had the Democratic legislature.
Yeah, Mitt, he will compromise in the sense that there's a lot of, he's the kind of guy that doesn't have, some of his principles aren't that firm, but he's also, I mean, if you want to ever look up the Big Dig, which is one of the greatest just wastes of government money ever on a construction project that went years over and hugely over budget and killed people and was just garbage. And he was the governor the whole time. And it was just like, and that's, I think, goes to what Destiny was saying. Like, you can say that these Republicans are so conservative, but they're really not as conservative as you think they're going to be with money, because they have it's this big moneyed interests come in and lobbyists come in and rich corporations come in. And the next thing you know, you're just giving them, oh, go ahead. I'll give you this government money to go and do things, and I'm not gonna look too closely. I'll look the other way when you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing with taxpayer dollars. Like, it's ridiculous. I have no patience for any of these people.
Or putting money on the deficit so that corporations can take the tax credits and breaks they're going to give 65% to themselves by buying back their stock and spend 15% on wages.
Well, the point that Destiny made was true. There's no place for actual fiscal conservatives really in American mainstream politics, because
definitely not.
Look what they've done with the tax cuts. It was immoral to give the rich that much tax. If you were going to have tax cuts, you would have to give them to the middle class and the poor for a start, and secondly, because that would actually stimulate economic growth. But the putting the already hugely bloated American military budget and putting an extra $400 billion or something on it. What are you doing? That's fucking madness.
Well, one of the big problems in the States is, and there was a study that showed, if you look at a policy outcome and you look at the factors that go into producing that policy, like lobbyist money and voter public opinion and citizen activism, when you put it out in a regression line, you estimate the impact of every single factor in your model. public voting, the public had no input, no statistically significant impact on the outcome of legislation. It was entirely down to lobbyists. And that's really the problem fundamentally. What we need to do is hopefully we can get a big wave in this next election and try to start freeing people, make politicians accountable to the voters, not to their lobbyists, because it costs money to run elections. And so people put interest money in there, and then you create these dependency relationships. So
and with the Citizens United thing, you give the rights to essentially campaign on behalf of political opponents to businesses. So you can essentially literally legally buy the votes of politicians, and there's nothing you could do. There's nothing you can do whilst that's in place.
Right, we've gone far afield. So who's going to come in next? Yeah, Bishop, the wrong bishop.
No, I think I don't disagree with anything you guys have said. I just think that it's kind of a corruption in the system, in a great system, rather than just a failure of the system itself. I think that there is a way to make corporatism work, and to be honest, I would say, as a whole, I think corporations have been a great conduit for social justice and for progressive values in other countries, in countries like, say, the Middle East and China. They've increased they've changed the cultures around them, and to be honest, I don't think that corporations are necessarily bad, but I do think that they need to work in their favor, and I do think that the government should be able to push back against it. And what I'm seeing right now, and what I haven't seen for the last 10 or so years, is just this government kowtowing to corporations, at the very least the Republican government, and partially the Democrat government. And I don't think that's healthy. I think that radicalizes the working poor, and you never want to radicalize the working poor, even if you believe by just kind of like principle that in this kind of like objectivism, you never want to be in a position where someone, where the working poor might overthrow you, and that to me seems foolish, and also just completely like self-destructive. It's suicidal, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think, I have always wondered seems to me that if you're a Republican, the best way to maintain, to get Republican voters is to raise everybody's income such that they are caring about how much they pay in taxes. Because that's something like people in the sort of middle class, upper middle class, and rich people do. Poor people don't pay, their taxes aren't the first burden that they're facing. It's like rent and, heating bills. And yet the policies that the Republicans carry out really just go to exacerbate income inequality. And as you say, lead to a radicalization of people in the lower economic status. And it just doesn't make any sense. Like you would want to, if you want to show the success of capitalism, then the principle of working a 40-hour week and work being valuable should mean that 40 hours of work gives you enough to live on. And shouldn't that be the goal of spreading the wealth of capitalism and showing its great success? And yet their policies just do the opposite.
Well, I would say it's meeting the minimum expectations of the working poor. It's that should be, I think, the goal of any administration. And I think there's been a lot of research on it, and I forgot the research for it, but the minimum expectations can be summarized as every person wants to do at a minimum a little bit better than their parents did, that when they were growing up. They want to feel like there is a progress. They want to feel like they're benefiting from the scientific research. They want to feel like they're benefiting from as society progresses. And when you do not see that kind of, when they're not being the recipients of this kind of social and scientific progress, they become radicalized. They become disillusioned with the system, and that's when revolution, that's when unrest happens, and that's something that you never want. Even if you, by principle, agree with objectivist kind of neoliberal values, you never want to be the ruler of ashes.
And on a sort of higher level, I think that the attacks by Putin and this whole exacerbation of the divisions in America is a way to create disillusionment and lose faith in democracy. It's showing that democracy can't properly govern, that your leaders are incompetent, that your country is falling apart. You need a strong leader who is going to put things right. That's the danger of it.
Well, this discussion of rape and sexual assault went weird.
Yeah, but we still have 775 viewers, so they're sticking around for something.
Oh, that's brilliant. I can now against these people. Fuck all of you. All 800 of you dickheads. There you go.
Should we bring it back though to sort of talk about? I think it's Christina Rad we were about to talk about.
That was an extended sidebar, but a very interesting one. But you're right. We should come back to the main theme of the show. So if you could go ahead, I just wanted to interrupt you to say, please continue.
All right. So are people aware of Lawrence Krauss and what's been going on as far as the article that was published about him, or even who the hell he is? Because like he has a certain cachet.
Why don't you tell us all about Mr. Krauss?
Oh God.
I love you guys and appreciate you. I've got something I have to do in a couple hours, so I need to do some work, but I appreciate the being on here to talk about Jeff. I'll duck out now, okay?
All right, thanks for coming on. It was nice to chat.
Good luck, guys.
Have a good night.
All right, so Lawrence Krauss is a physicist. He's also sort of an educator of science to sort of the public. And he was an atheist, or a new atheist, one of the people that went to a lot of conventions and did a lot of speaking. And for a long time now, women have been saying that he has been very inappropriate with them. But it's because of his litigiousness and just a lack of interest and follow through on the issue, really. It hadn't really come to light in a very public way. It was more like a whisper campaign of, you know, he does these things and you should stay away from him. And so BuzzFeed did an article just recently where they sort of just collected a lot of these claims that have gone on over the years, over the past 10 years, including being kicked out of a couple of universities and some of the things that have happened, and various people have come forward. And the new atheists had a fairly, they did not have the most wonderful responses overall. Eventually, most of them have come around now to being like, well, yes, it does appear that he sexually harassed some women and we should probably not have him in all of our conventions. But it took a while, and they haven't really been able to do sort of a clear, like, okay, so he did these things, it's bad, that's the end. You know, it has to be, well, he may have done some of these things, and we feel bad for him because he's got problems, and Me Too is a witch hunt also, and we really need to make sure everybody understands the difference between rape and, you know, all these other things, you know, all this sort of window dressing that has to be put around because they can't just make a simple statement like, yeah, sexual harassment is bad. So Christina Rad, she's been an atheist YouTuber. She's a Romanian woman, and a YouTuber for years and years. I've really enjoyed watching her stuff in the past, but she hasn't really posted much for like a couple of years. So she just came out with a video where she discusses her own personal situation, where she met Krauss and he was just touching her inappropriately in front of people, and she was horrified by that and, you know, kind of took off after that. But she was sort of just coming forward to say, look, you guys, you need to listen to women. And it was a very, like, listening to her was kind of heartbreaking because you could see that she was coming forward with the expectation that even with all of this, she wouldn't be believed. Like, she's, you know, hedging all of her bets and saying, I know you guys are going to just say I'm a lying hoe and I'm coming after your guy. And it just sort of showed how difficult it is for women to sort of come over this barrier to talk about this, and how important the Me Too movement is for that, in giving women this opportunity to have a voice and to say, no, this is what's happening and it's not right. That's my spiel.
It was very well said, very succinct and to the point, and very morally clear. Yeah, and if you haven't watched the video yet, I would recommend that you go and watch it. As Chrisiousity mentions, you can tell that she's very nervous about telling her story. But I also think that it's important because I've had a situation where someone came to me and it was over electronic communication, and she confided in me something that happened to her. And I could tell, like, from the way she was using language, she was distressed, but I didn't hear her story in person. And this isn't a personal story, but it is a visual medium. You know, it's the next best thing to her telling you personally. When she goes through the motions and describes and actually demonstrates how Kraus touched her, it gave me the shudders. Like, it's so clearly could not be misunderstood. Absolutely not. And if this was, and her demonstrating that, and she also linked it to the woman who, you know, kept trying to touch her leg, and the visual image of how creeped out, disturbed, stunned, violated, you know, so many people, women, have felt when he's pulled this stuff on him, it does have a different impact. So I would recommend going and watching, and if it makes an impression on you, leave a positive comment for her so that she doesn't just get backlash. She does know that there are people out there who support her. Yeah, so that's my thought.
Yeah, that was a really heartrending moment when she basically said, she goes through this intro like, explaining the backstory and stuff, and she's clearly really upset and sort of scared about the reaction she's going to get. It's appalling that's. I mean, people ask why women don't come forward more often. Look at that. Look, I mean, that was just a relatively mild story. She wasn't even accusing him of like rape or anything, and for her to be that scared, I mean, it was just appalling.
And I have to say that I'm as disappointed as I am with the wishy-washy or complete lack of responses from the leadership, the faces of movement atheism. There are so many voices at the next level down, the sort of YouTube personalities, the podcast personalities, the people with big Twitter followings, the people with blogs or vlogs, people who are active in their community, who are disgusted and are disgusted by the lack of response. And it's that, you know, I can't think, maybe I'm wrong and someone can correct me. I mean, if when the charges started to come out against the police and there was a group formed within the Catholic Church of people who weren't in leadership, but who cared about these issues and were criticizing the church and saying we need stronger reactions, you know, I don't know if any group did that, but I am so proud of the people who are stepping up, and Chrisiousity and Kevin have both talked about this issue and made their voices part of the conversation on social media and through YouTube. And that is what we need, because us connecting up together and also presenting an alternative, you know, this is sort of the same, you know, moral failings that the wrong bishop was talking about. If you say that you adhere to humanist principles, then you cannot fail to lead when a situation like this comes up. And I think that it's a really good thing that we have a lot of people who not only are speaking up, but then have their audiences supporting them and echoing back saying, I feel the same way too. Or here's another point that you didn't mention on this same topic. So as frustrating as the reaction has been, as people, you know, this person, she came forward and there are people here to support her and say, yes, we believe you. When you tell this story, I'm not going to call you names. I'm going to say, that sounds really awful. So that's my thoughts on it. I don't know if Kevin, I don't know, or Chrisiousity, I don't know if you want to speak at all on this, because I know you were on a heck of a podcast panel, actually. If you could talk a little bit to this too, because you guys made some great points on that show.
Yeah, so Ina, who has Polite Conversations, the podcast, invited me on with Thomas Smith and Godless Mama. And, you know, I think that there is a lot of frustration that a lot of people in the atheist community are just getting sick of it. You know, they're just getting, they're just I think everybody is like there's this feeling now with, I think, Me Too and its sort of sister movements that it's had, church too, mosque too, like of just, we're all done with this. We're just done. Like it's got to stop. And it's been both like you say, it's frustrating and wonderful, and frustrating and wonderful, back and forth. I do think that one of the things is that we need more men speaking up. And I think that a point that has to be made is this is in a large part a men's problem, both because men can be victimized by people who are sexual harassers, but also because largely the people who are doing these things are men. And the fact that it's put out as a woman's issue or a trans person's issue or a gender issue, but not a men's issue, I think really does a disservice to the whole movement and to the whole idea of it, because men have to have this discussion with each other. They need to stop coming back, I'm sorry to say it, and saying, oh, you Me Too women, you can't understand this and you can't do that, right? And you're too loud about this and you're just on a witch hunt and a moral panic. They need to stop worrying about that, and they need to start talking to each other and saying, why are we having this problem? Why is our gender doing this? Or maybe a small percentage overall of men, and I think it is a small percentage overall. I don't think the majority of men are doing these things. I think it's a minority, but it's a big enough minority to be a serious problem. And let's face it, a lot of the other men are enabling it. And I think that there has to be a conversation among men about where is this coming from and how do we stop it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think it starts with even just silly things like sexist jokes, and I'm not just talking about just like vaguely sexist jokes, like rape jokes and things that get told, and you just move on. Like not one, but a lot of people just accept it and move on, and that's what starts to create the toxic environment that allows rape to become so incredibly prevalent. And it's men have to sort that out.
And I think that there are norms. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I think that there are norms that are really harmful that are instilled in boys that they go on to carry out as men. And I think Donald Trump is probably a great example of that. He was socialized at a time into a worldview he can't seem to escape, where women are objects of his visual and sexual pleasure. And he's the big man on campus, and that's just how things are. And he was the product of a whole bunch of attitudes. And I don't want to stop guys from being guys, or to appreciate a good-looking person, or to even make jokes. But it's the dehumanization that sometimes accompanies the presentation of women that I think makes it easier to do things like try to take advantage of them, like Matt Lauer did, or assume that women are going to want to come, are excited by you, like Louis C.K. There's something there that does need to be talked about in terms of how you view women and their expectations, in those situations, and then fix that problem. It's not like we want to control the world and never say a sexist thing ever again, or, make say someone's hot. That's not the issue. It's about the things in their behaviors that are causing the problems. Like, I think that in a different situation, Louis C.K. wouldn't have made those decisions, because you know what? Most men don't make that decision. As Chrisiousity said, we're not talking about men just running around acting out of control, but there are these, especially with power, there seems to be maybe because more men are in power than women, but that ability to use money or influence as leverage tends to leverage, for some people, sex. So
yeah, I agree completely with that, and I want to make a point, because I'm about to duck out. It is that I find it completely disgusting how there's this apathy many men faced was kind of women's issue and like women's violence issues, especially in the sense that it's not going to happen to me, so I shouldn't worry about it. And I find that, you know, I've heard people say that, and I find that completely disgusting. I think that in a very real sense, it's these problems are everyone's problems. These are social problems, and if we live in a society that kind of allows these things and that tolerates these things, then we can never say that we live in a fair society if people are facing this type of injustice. And I do agree with Kevin and Chrisiousity and you, Kristi, here that it's something that men should be almost at the forefront of it and in kind of like calling out this despicable behavior, because it's kind of, they're the ones that have in the culture, in a certain sense, there is a separate culture between kind of the men and the women, and there is locker room talk, and being part of that locker room, you should be able to kind of stand up and say, oh, that's not cool, buddy, you know, and that it's not happening, that this kind of conversation is not happening, that this kind of like ideas are not being propagated, and instead we're defending this type of sexual assault. To me is something that like I said, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I thought we were all on the same page, that this will never be cool and this type of thing will never be cool. But I guess I was wrong, and we weren't on the same page. And I guess that's kind of my what I will end my stay here, because I do have to go now. Thank you.
No, it's been great, and I'll have to make sure to thank StirCore for setting us up on this Google Hangout play date where you came over. And it was fantastic.
I have watched some of your videos before, like I said, and I find them very elucidating. I like listening to lawyers talk and explain things.
Well, you've got after this, I will be you will be gaining a new subscriber in me, Wrong Bishop, because you were rather interesting.
Yeah,
thank you. I appreciate it.
To whatever you're your YouTube channel, and I'll put it in the description box below so people can find you. Sure, I will DM you on Twitter. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Like I said, I think you guys are doing great here, and I appreciate it all. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. 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 And then there were three.
And we're back. back to the original gang of three. Nice.
Yeah. Well, that was a wild ride.
We just had random YouTube celebrity people just popping in. It was fine, you know.
We were just playing it chill.
Got over 800 fucking people watching at one point, which is mental. There you go.
They all ditched out after Destiny left, which I get that, but you know, they came for the ride, so that was fun. But we still love the people watching now. So thank you.
No, I don't. I still hate everyone. So.
Yes, he ironically hates you. So did we want to keep going, or do we want to wrap it up? How are you guys feeling?
I don't know. I'm hungry. That doesn't really answer your question, but
you could, because that's what I did. I took my break. I just say a little of the backroom story, like what's happening. So I wanted to go get a snack, so I just threw the show over to Kevin for a little while. Went and refreshed my drink. Got some hummus. Spicy hummus.
Do you know what my leading of the show entailed? Absolutely nothing. They were having a great discussion, so I just let it go.
That's a good time to be a host.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, I gotta. It is almost dinner time here. Okay.
And your crazy children are about to go fucking mental over spaghetti or something. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's St. Patrick's Day, which in Boston is a thing. In the Boston area. I think it might be a bigger thing than it is in Ireland sometimes, but
it is. Yeah. Well, I know that both the Boston and New York St. Patrick's Day parade were always bigger than the one in Dublin, which is quite nice.
So I've got that going on.
I love that because of the immigration, obviously, of Irish people to those places. But I love the fact that in Ireland you get the odd person who's like really anti-immigrant, and you think, you're Irish? What? That's fucking madness. Like spiders being against having 8 legs. What?
Can you make green macaroni and cheese by adding a few drops of blue dye, or would it have to be green dye?
Oh no, we do. It's got to be corned beef and cabbage, no carrots, because that's.
Oh, did you see this river in Chicago? They dyed it green again.
Yeah, they dyed it green every year.
Yeah, that can't be ecologically healthy. Jesus
they
Christ.
use something kind of thing. They've checked it out. Like there's documentaries on how they turn the river green. You should check it out.
It's weird. I like it. If it's safe, I like it, but it's weird.
Yeah, it's pretty safe from what I understand. And it goes away after like a day. It sort of dissolves or gets absorbed by bacteria or something. I don't know.
Americans think like spray on cheese in a can is safe, and it isn't. It's disgusting.
Wait, these things are not mutually exclusive. It can be disgusting and perfectly safe.
No, it's an abomination. It might be legal, but as we said earlier, just because it's not illegal. Right.
Have you ever tried it?
No, because I value my body in some senses.
I'm going to send you some cheese, squeezy cheese or whatever it is,
and I
in a can.
I will be informing the terrorist authorities that you are a barbarian.
And then after the first try, you're just going to be doing like what people do with whipped cream when they have it in a can. You're just going to be doing squeezy cheese right into your mouth.
No, I can't help but feel that cheese in a
American
can
cheddar.
cheddar. Trying any kind of American cheese,
Bright
especially
orange.
cheese in a can, should classify as a suicide attempt. Frankly, it's disgusting.
I have to say, I have there's a place in Cologne called the English Shop, and there you can get Kraft macaroni and cheese. And I occasionally.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to sue them then because they've taken the name of my nation and abused it in that way.
Well, you'll have to come visit and complain to them.
Because it's not an English shop; it's an American travesty.
No, it's mostly English, like candies and chocolates and biscuits, and you can get some Marmite in there and some other things, and tea, lots of tea. But they do have a few American things too because there's quite a lot of Americans in Cologne. Anyway, back to my story.
Don't you eat things like Bubble and Squeak and Spotted Dick?
In England, they do.
I don't, because I'm not a monster. Oh, Jesus Christ!
Isn't that like what?
Oh,
where are you coming from?
Bubble and Squeak is a travesty, but Spotted Dick's actually quite tasty. It's quite nice.
Well, which is the one not with lamb? Which pie, Shepherd's or Cottage, has minced beef? One of them. I think it's Cottage. That's so good. You should really make cottage pie. It's excellent. Find a recipe. It's so nice.
Oh,
there are potatoes on the top. Oh, it's so nice. Yeah.
I tell you, that's also good.
But getting back to my macaroni and cheese story, God damn it.
Curry's amazing. It's not English.
Curry is also very good. Yeah. They had a knockoff sort of macaroni and cheese last time I went because they were out of the Kraft. So I got that sort of disappointed. But when I got home, it wasn't bright orange and it didn't have that sharp, tangy sort of processed cheese taste of Kraft macaroni and cheese. And it's very disappointing. So don't have that for dinner. All right, everyone's muted themselves for my.
Yeah, no, I was just disgusted by the fact that you were upset that it wasn't orange and tangy.
Yeah,
it's cheese, or it's at least in theory supposed.
That's
to
what cheddar is like.
No, it isn't. No. Don't.
When's the last time you had actual really good cheddar cheese?
I eat good cheddar cheese every day.
It's probably Gouda.
Person that eats cheese that clears rooms.
Oh, big Stilton fan in the room.
Stilton is like fucking nothing.
Blue cheese then. What do you like? Yeah, you just snort it right up in a line. Blue cheese. Just crumble out a little.
I could inhale cheese. Frankly, I sweat cheese. That's the part.
So poor Chrisiousity.
No, that's fine.
I think we were wrapping it up, so you could go and have dinner with your family.
Yes.
That's where we got before we went on a sidetrack.
That's what we were doing. That's right.
Well, go check out Christianity. Do you have one last thing you wanted to say?
Just hey, thanks to everybody for watching. This was awesome.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Kevin, Kevin, any positive reviews of our own program that you'd like to give? No.
Our program's awesome, but I'd just like to say I think America needs to stop its war on drugs and start its war on cheese because its cheese industry is disgusting.
Oh, America just needs to stop wars. Don't give us another thing to have a war on.
Exactly. You need to stop all of your wars on everything else, like random brown people and stuff, and start drone striking your cheese manufacturing facilities. I think that would be best for the world.
Wallace of Wallace and Gromit would be horrified if there was a war on cheese.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, but a war on American cheese, which is cheese.
Oh, he's muted himself. Thanks for Kevin. Yeah, just mute yourself. That's
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I didn't press the. I was just saying that American cheese isn't really. It's cheese in inverted commas. You know, it's Anyway.
There we go. And on that bombshell, everyone, on that declaration
this
of
got
war,
weird.
and
this
the
is weird. Man.
And the war on cheese. Get your own T-shirt from Kevin's channel. He'll come up with them shortly. Thank you to everybody who's watched the show. I do appreciate your time and attention. I've been
Vive la
Kristi.
fromage.
You guys have been awesome. Chrisiousity been awesome. Kevin's been awesome. Goodbye from me and goodbye from my guests. Say goodbye, Chrisiousity and Kevin.
Bye. Goodbye, Chrisiousity and Kevin.
Bye, guys.